You've been lied to about self-love. They told you it comes from achievement, from looking perfect, from being someone everyone else admires. But if that were true, why do you still feel not enough? Why do the compliments fade but the self-doubt stays? Why do your thoughts race the moment your head hits the pillow? The truth is, self-love isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you are underneath the noise. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about letting go of what was never really you to begin with. And that's where Buddhist wisdom comes in. For thousands of years, it's whispered the secret to peace, not by filling yourself up, but by emptying what hurts. The need to impress, the fear of being alone, the clinging to stories that tell you you're not worthy. Tonight, those stories lose their power. Tonight, you'll hear teachings so gentle, they'll melt your tension. So deep, they'll soften your heart. So clear, they'll silence the overthinking. This isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming free. As you listen, something will shift. The voice that used to criticize you will grow quiet. The knots in your chest will loosen. And slowly, beautifully, you'll remember what it feels like to be safe inside your own soul. Not because the world changed, but because you did. This isn't just something to fall asleep to. It's a path back to yourself. A soft landing after years of being hard on your heart. Are you ready? Let's begin. You're still here. That already means something. It means you're searching for more than sleep. You're searching for truth. The kind that doesn't come wrapped in noise, approval, or performance. A deeper kind. The kind that makes you feel at home in your own presence. Safe in your own skin. And maybe for the first time in a long time, or whole. The teachings tonight are not just stories. They're invitations. Gentle nudges back to yourself. No need to believe anything blindly. No pressure to be anything more than what you already are. This isn't about becoming better. This is about coming closer. Not to someone else's path, but to yours. Because the truth that heals you, it can't be borrowed. It has to be lived. And this is where the path begins. There's a phrase found quietly within the early teachings of the Buddha, one that carries more power than it seems at first glance. Ehi passiko. It means, come and see for yourself. No dogma, no forced belief. Just an invitation to explore, to observe, to feel, to know for yourself what's real and what's not. It may sound simple, but hidden inside that invitation is the key to true freedom. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught to trust everyone else but ourselves. We were trained to collect approval like currency, to believe that value comes from being seen, liked, praised, from being right by someone else's definition. But when you live that way long enough, something quiet inside you starts to ache. It's the ache of disconnection, from your own knowing, from your own heart, from your truth. This is what Ehi passiko dissolves. It invites you to step away from the noise, the filters, the performance, the need to impress, and turn your attention inward, to build a relationship with your direct experience. Because truth doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. When you start to live like this, something subtle but powerful begins to change. You stop needing permission to feel what you feel. You stop waiting for someone to validate your worth. You stop giving your power away. That doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you become clear. The kind of clear that can smile at compliments without clinging to them. That can hear criticism without collapsing. That can walk into a room without checking the mirrors first. This kind of clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from seeing more clearly. And the Buddha's path was always rooted in direct seeing, not memorizing beliefs, not forcing faith, but trusting that your own experience, when met with honesty and awareness, can show you what's true. It's not always easy, because turning inward means meeting parts of yourself that have been hidden or avoided. The doubt, the fear, the confusion, the not enough. But even these, when looked at gently, begin to lose their grip. That's because they thrive in darkness, in secrecy, in the belief that they are you. But they're not, they're just visitors. And Ehi invites you to sit with them, not to push them away, not to fix them, but to see them fully, without judgment, without flinching. And something miraculous happens when you do this. You begin to trust yourself, not in an arrogant way, not in a look at me, I know everything way, but in a quiet, grounded, steady way. The kind of trust that doesn't need to shout, it simply stands. You begin to realize that wisdom isn't some faraway treasure only enlightened people can reach. It's already here, inside you, waiting to be uncovered. The Buddha wasn't a god or a magician. He was a human being who paid deep, careful attention, who walked through suffering and didn't run away, who found peace by watching, by listening, by questioning even his own mind. And then he turned to the world and said, "You try, come and see." That invitation is still open to every single person. No matter your story, your past, your regrets, or your doubts. You don't need to change your life overnight. You don't need to sit under a tree for 7 days. You don't need to memorize any teachings or chant anything in perfect pronunciation. All you need is one thing: the courage to be curious about your own experience. That might mean noticing how it feels when your breath slows down, how it softens your chest, how your thoughts quiet, even just for a second. It might mean observing the thoughts that say you're not lovable and questioning them instead of believing them. It might mean noticing how much tension lives in your body when you try to please everyone and gently asking yourself, why? These moments are small, but they're sacred, because each one is a crack in the armor, a chance to touch the part of you that is always whole, even when the rest feels messy. When you begin to live this way, something else starts to dissolve: comparison. You stop measuring your worth against everyone else's highlight reel. You stop chasing happiness like it's out there somewhere, waiting to be earned. Instead, you start to taste life as it is. You start to trust that your experience, even the hard parts, is meaningful, that your insight matters, that your healing doesn't need to look like anyone else's. That kind of inner freedom changes everything. You begin to move through the world with more honesty. You say yes and no with more confidence. You stop waiting for everyone else to agree with you before you believe in yourself. Not because you've become stubborn or closed, but because you're no longer guessing at who you are. You're experiencing it directly, moment by moment. And this is where the real power of Ehi shines. Because it doesn't give you answers, it gives you access. Access to the deepest parts of yourself, not just the pretty ones. The parts that are confused, the parts that are healing, the parts that long for love but are afraid to ask for it. All of it becomes part of the path. Nothing is wasted. There is no experience that can't be learned from when you're willing to stay present with it. There is no emotion that can't be softened by awareness. There is no story so old that it can't be rewritten by presence. And the best part is, no one can do this for you, and no one can take it away. When your peace comes from your own seeing, it's yours. Not borrowed, not fragile, but rooted. That doesn't mean you'll never struggle. It means you'll have a way to meet your struggle, one that's grounded in compassion instead of shame, curiosity instead of control. This is what it means to walk the path. Not just read about it, not just think about it, but to live it, gently, honestly, moment by moment. And in doing so, you begin to feel something rare in this world: sovereignty. You become the author of your inner life. You stop outsourcing your truth. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop waiting for perfect conditions before you allow yourself to feel peace. You start offering that peace to yourself, now, in this moment, as you are. There's no enlightenment in pretending, there's no wisdom in pretending, and there's no love in pretending. What the Buddha taught, what every awakened being teaches in their own way, is that the path back to yourself is through honesty, radical, loving honesty. And the only way to get there is to look, to listen, to turn inward. Come and see, not because someone told you to, but because somewhere inside you know there's more than the roles you've played, more than the masks you've worn, more than the fears you've obeyed. Beneath all of it, there's clarity. And that clarity doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need applause, it doesn't need to win or be right or impress anyone. It simply is. Quiet, steady, luminous. You don't have to earn it, you just have to uncover it. And every time you meet yourself without judgment, every time you pause and listen, you come closer. Not to an idea of perfection, but to the truth of your own being. That's what ehipassiko really means. Not come and believe, but come and know. Come and feel. Come and remember. This is not philosophy for the intellect, this is nourishment for the soul. You are not broken, you are not behind, you are not late. You are right on time, and the invitation is here. Let it echo softly in your heart as you drift gently into rest. Come and see, come and see, come and be. And so you begin to sense it, the stillness, the subtle strength of seeing clearly. You've stepped out of performance and into presence. You no longer chase approval like air. You've tasted what it means to trust yourself, not in theory, but in experience. But even in that clarity, something deeper stirs. Not everything within you feels soft. Not every corner feels peaceful, because in the quiet, you begin to notice what's been buried. There are parts of you still aching, parts carrying stories too heavy to carry alone, thoughts you try to silence, feelings you've been told to outgrow, shame that creeps in without warning, guilt that won't let go, fear that whispers you're still not enough. These aren't mistakes in your path, they are the path. The light doesn't just illuminate what you want to see, it reveals what you've tried to forget. And this is where the real work begins, not through force or fixing, but through metta, loving kindness. Not the surface level kind, not the smile on your face, everything's fine kind, but the kind that reaches into the shadows, that says, even this belongs, even you belong. A love that doesn't skip over pain, but includes it, not to drown in it, but to free it. This is metta for the parts of you you've been at war with, not to change them, but to hold them close, because love isn't earned by being flawless, it's revealed by being fully met. Loving kindness, meditation, or metta bhavana is not a technique meant to make you feel peaceful all the time. It's a practice of opening even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. It begins with extending goodwill toward yourself, but not just the part that smiles and achieves, also the part that cries at night. That gets it wrong. That snaps when it's scared. That feels lost in rooms full of people, that regrets the past and fears the future. To meet those parts with kindness is to begin the most radical healing. The process doesn't start by forcing positive thoughts. It begins with telling the truth, that you're tired of running from yourself, that you're done editing your humanity to be more lovable, that you are ready to sit beside the parts that hurt without pushing them away. At first, this may feel unnatural. You might feel resistance. After all, you've been trained to fix yourself, not love yourself as you are. You've been taught to be productive, not present, to be good, not whole. But metta isn't about making you good, it's about making you whole again. When you close your eyes and bring your attention to the heart, you're not trying to force a feeling, you're offering space. You're saying, whatever is here, I won't turn away. You begin with gentle phrases, repeated like seeds. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be kind to myself. May I live with ease. You don't need to feel them at first. You only need to offer them. Like planting seeds in soil you've forgotten how to trust. And then you direct these same wishes toward the parts of you you've rejected. To the memory that makes your stomach drop. To the version of you that hurt others when you didn't know better. To the habits you hide. To the shame that still lives in your body. May this part of me be held. May this pain be softened. May this fear know it's not alone. May this shame feel seen without punishment. This is not self-pity. It's not denial. It's fierce compassion. The kind that sees clearly and still stays. The kind that doesn't need you to be cleaned up to be worthy. When you meet your inner shadows with metta, you begin to unlearn a lifelong habit, rejection. Most people try to meditate away their darkness, but this practice says, bring it with you, not to indulge it, but to understand it, because what you meet with love transforms. What you avoid controls you. Guilt isn't healed by shame, it's softened by truth and care. Fear isn't silenced by willpower, it's calmed by presence. Shame doesn't disappear through achievement, it dissolves through understanding. Metta doesn't rush, it doesn't demand perfection, it meets what's real again and again, until that meeting becomes familiar. And eventually, the parts of you that once flinched at your own presence begin to soften, because they finally feel safe. You begin to see that the most wounded parts of you are not enemies. They are younger versions of you, stuck in survival. They need attention, not punishment. They need warmth, not discipline. They need your own heart to come home to them. And this homecoming is slow, but it's steady. It happens every time you breathe gently into a tight space in your chest and say, you're allowed to be here. Every time you remember that you are not your thoughts, and yet you can hold them with tenderness. Every time you say no to the inner voice that shames you, and yes to the voice that soothes. The deeper you go into metta, the more you begin to understand this truth. Love isn't something you give yourself once and then move on. It's a practice, a rhythm, a returning, especially when it's hard, especially when the old stories rise up again, the ones that say you're too broken, too late, too far gone. Those stories don't need to be argued with, they need to be seen through. And the seeing comes through softness, through repeating the phrases again, through remembering that even the worst thought about yourself is still just a thought, and that thoughts pass, but the heart remains. This isn't about pretending you're okay, it's about knowing that being not okay is also part of the path, that you can hold the mess and the magic in the same hands, that you can sit in silence and feel pain without being consumed by it, that you can love yourself not because of your strength, but through your tenderness. This kind of practice builds something unshakable, not a shield, but a sanctuary, a space inside that says, no matter what you feel, you don't have to go away. When the world feels overwhelming, you return here. When mistakes weigh heavy, you return here. When your mind says you're not good enough, you return here. To breath, to space, to kindness, to the simple act of saying, may I be kind to this moment. May I be gentle with what I find here. May I let myself belong to this breath. You're not healing yourself so you can be more acceptable. You're healing yourself because you finally remember you were never meant to be at war with yourself in the first place. Metta for the shadow self isn't the end of the journey, but it's the part where things begin to soften. where what was frozen begins to melt, where the armor starts to fall. And beneath it, something unexpected rises. Not perfection, but peace. A peace that doesn't need to prove anything. A peace that doesn't collapse in the face of discomfort. A peace that can say, yes, I carry pain, and I carry love too. You carry both. You always have. But now you're learning how to hold them together, not as opposites, but as companions, as parts of one whole human heart. This is what it means to be free, not by erasing what hurts, but by including it in love so fully that it loses its sharpness. This love is yours to offer, every day, every breath, every time you return. No matter how far you've drifted, no matter how long it's been, right now is a perfect moment to begin again. And so you begin to sense it, the stillness, the subtle strength of seeing clearly. You've stepped out of performance and into presence. You no longer chase approval like air. You've tasted what it means to trust yourself, not in theory, but in experience. But even in that clarity, something deeper stirs. Not everything within you feels soft. Not every corner feels peaceful, because in the quiet, you begin to notice what's been buried. There are parts of you still aching, parts carrying stories too heavy to carry alone, thoughts you try to silence, feelings you've been told to outgrow, shame that creeps in without warning, guilt that won't let go, fear that whispers you're still not enough. These aren't mistakes in your path, they are the path. The light doesn't just illuminate what you want to see, it reveals what you've tried to forget. And this is where the real work begins, not through force or fixing, but through metta, loving kindness. Not the surface-level kind, not the smile on your face, everything's fine kind, but the kind that reaches into the shadows, that says, even this belongs, even you belong. A love that doesn't skip over pain, but includes it, not to drown in it, but to free it. This is metta for the parts of you you've been at war with, not to change them, but to hold them close, because love isn't earned by being flawless, it's revealed by being fully met. Loving kindness meditation, or metta bhavana, is not a technique meant to make you feel peaceful all the time. It's a practice of opening even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. It begins with extending goodwill toward yourself, but not just the part that smiles and achieves, also the part that cries at night, that gets it wrong, that snaps when it's scared, that feels lost in rooms full of people, that regrets the past and fears the future. To meet those parts with kindness is to begin the most radical healing. The process doesn't start by forcing positive thoughts. It begins with telling the truth, that you're tired of running from yourself, that you're done editing your humanity to be more lovable, that you are ready to sit beside the parts that hurt without pushing them away. At first, this may feel unnatural. You might feel resistance. After all, you've been trained to fix yourself, not love yourself as you are. You've been taught to be productive, not present, to be good, not whole. But metta isn't about making you good, it's about making you whole again. When you close your eyes and bring your attention to the heart, you're not trying to force a feeling, you're offering space. You're saying, whatever is here, I won't turn away. You begin with gentle phrases, repeated like seeds. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be kind to myself. May I live with ease. You don't need to feel them at first. You only need to offer them. Like planting seeds in soil you've forgotten how to trust. And then you direct these same wishes toward the parts of you you've rejected, to the memory that makes your stomach drop, to the version of you that hurt others when you didn't know better, to the habits you hide, to the shame that still lives in your body. May this part of me be held. May this pain be softened. May this fear know it's not alone. May this shame feel seen without punishment. This is not self-pity, it's not denial, it's fierce compassion, the kind that sees clearly and still stays, the kind that doesn't need you to be cleaned up to be worthy. When you meet your inner shadows with metta, you begin to unlearn a lifelong habit, rejection. Most people try to meditate away their darkness, but this practice says, bring it with you, not to indulge it, but to understand it, because what you meet with, love, transforms. What you avoid controls you. Guilt isn't healed by shame, it's softened by truth and care. Fear isn't silenced by willpower, it's calmed by presence. Shame doesn't disappear through achievement, it dissolves through understanding. Metta doesn't rush, it doesn't demand perfection, it meets what's real again and again, until that meeting becomes familiar. And eventually, the parts of you that once flinched at your own presence begin to soften, because they finally feel safe. You begin to see that the most wounded parts of you are not enemies, they are younger versions of you, stuck in survival. They need attention, not punishment. They need warmth, not discipline. They need your own heart to come home to them. And this homecoming is slow, but it's steady. It happens every time you breathe gently into a tight space in your chest and say, "You're allowed to be here." Every time you remember that you are not your thoughts, and yet you can hold them with tenderness. Every time you say no to the inner voice that shames you, and yes to the voice that soothes. The deeper you go into metta, the more you begin to understand this truth. Love isn't something you give yourself once and then move on. It's a practice, a rhythm, a returning, especially when it's hard, especially when the old stories rise up again, the ones that say you're too broken, too late, too far gone. Those stories don't need to be argued with, they need to be seen through. And the seeing comes through softness, through repeating the phrases again, through remembering that even the worst thought about yourself is still just a thought, and that thoughts pass, but the heart remains. This isn't about pretending you're okay, it's about knowing that being not okay is also part of the path. That you can hold the mess and the magic in the same hands. That you can sit in silence and feel pain without being consumed by it. That you can love yourself not because of your strength, but through your tenderness. This kind of practice builds something unshakable, not a shield, but a sanctuary, a space inside that says, no matter what you feel, you don't have to go away. When the world feels overwhelming, you return here. When mistakes weigh heavy, you return here. When your mind says you're not good enough, you return here. To breath, to space, to kindness, to the simple act of saying, may I be kind to this moment. May I be gentle with what I find here. May I let myself belong to this breath. You're not healing yourself so you can be more acceptable. You're healing yourself because you finally remember you were never meant to be at war with yourself in the first place. Metta for the shadow self isn't the end of the journey, but it's the part where things begin to soften, where what was frozen begins to melt, where the armor starts to fall. And beneath it, something unexpected rises. Not perfection, but peace. A peace that doesn't need to prove anything. A peace that doesn't collapse in the face of discomfort. A peace that can say, yes, I carry pain, and I carry love too. You carry both. You always have. But now you're learning how to hold them together, not as opposites, but as companions, as parts of one whole human heart. This is what it means to be free, not by erasing what hurts, but by including it in love so fully that it loses its sharpness. This love is yours to offer, every day, every breath, every time you return. No matter how far you've drifted, no matter how long it's been, right now is a perfect moment to begin again. Even as kindness begins to bloom within, the voice of judgment can still linger. It waits in the background, ready to speak when you make a mistake, fall short, or simply feel uncertain. It speaks in sharp tones: "You're not enough, you're wrong again, you'll never change." That voice doesn't care how much progress you've made. It isn't softened by your victories. It clings to your flaws like facts. And the most painful part is how convincing it sounds. But what if that voice isn't telling the truth? What if the one judging you isn't really you? There's a teaching deep, quiet, often misunderstood, that begins to untangle this illusion. It's called anatta, or non-self. And far from being cold or confusing, it holds one of the warmest truths you'll ever hear. You are not the voice that tears you down. You are not fixed. You are not frozen in identity. And you are not stuck inside a story you didn't choose. Non-self is not the absence of life. It is the absence of limitation. It starts with noticing something simple: how thoughts come and go on their own. You don't plan every emotion. You don't invite every memory. The mind moves like weather. Clouds of criticism can pass through, but they are not the sky. They do not define it. They do not stay forever. When the Buddha taught about non-self, he wasn't saying you don't exist. He was pointing to a deeper freedom, that what you think you are is not what you truly are. Not the voice in your head. Not the pain in your chest. Not the names others gave you. Not even the name you gave yourself. You are awareness. And awareness doesn't have to believe every thought it notices. Self-criticism only survives when you mistake thoughts for identity. When "I feel like a failure" becomes "I am a failure." But the moment you step back and see the thought as just a thought, it loses its grip. It becomes what it always was: a passing mental event, not a life sentence. This shift isn't intellectual, it's experiential. You don't convince yourself out of judgment. You watch it. You witness how it arises, how it speaks, how it fades. And in that watching, something loosens. The belief that it must be true starts to weaken. You begin to see through the old labels, the inner critic, the unworthiness, the pressure to be perfect. They start to look less like reality and more like habits. And habits can be changed. Anatta helps you see that the version of you you're criticizing is already gone. Every moment, you are shifting not in a chaotic way, but in a living, breathing way. No thought is permanent. No feeling lasts forever. No identity stays fixed. This doesn't mean you float through life without responsibility. It means you stop punishing yourself for being human. It means the mistakes you made yesterday do not define you today. It means the voice that says, "You always do this," or "You never change," is just recycling old patterns. It means you can stop carrying your past like a burden and meet yourself freshly, as you are, not as you were. Through the lens of non-self, even the harshest judgments lose their weight. Because who exactly are they judging? The one who no longer exists, the thought that's already gone, the action that passed like a breeze through the body. And if you are not a fixed thing, if you are not bound to one version of self, then you are free to grow. Self-love, through the lens of anatta, becomes less about affirmations and more about understanding. You understand that your inner critic is not the truth, just a voice shaped by causes and conditions, upbringing, pain, fear, stories. You don't need to silence it with force. You simply stop confusing it for your identity. The more you see the impermanence of each thought, the more spacious your mind becomes. You no longer believe everything it says. You become less reactive, less controlled. You notice the urge to judge and choose not to feed it, not out of effort, but out of clarity. And in that clarity, self-compassion has room to grow. You start to speak to yourself with more tenderness. You begin to recognize when criticism arises from fear, and instead of following it, you comfort it. You remind yourself, this too will pass. You learn to pause when the voice of judgment rises and ask, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this who I want to be in this moment? That questioning doesn't come from anxiety. It comes from wisdom. It comes from the growing understanding that identity is not fixed, that you are not what you've done, and that you can meet yourself with new eyes every time. This is not detachment in a cold sense. It's release. Release from false certainty, from painful labels, from the idea that you are some permanent thing that can be broken. You are not broken. You are becoming. And becoming requires space. The space to make mistakes, to evolve, to change direction, to soften into who you are without rigid expectations. Non-self is that space, a letting go of the grip around me, mine, I always, I never. In that letting go, your suffering begins to dissolve, not because you've fixed everything, but because you've stopped holding so tightly to the one who must be fixed. This changes how you move through life. You become less defensive when others criticize you, because you no longer believe that criticism strikes at some solid core. You become more open to learning, because growth doesn't threaten your identity. You stop needing to protect a version of yourself and start getting curious about the next one that might emerge. Self-criticism is often rooted in fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being unlovable. But when you see that self is not a fixed object, those fears soften. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to meet every expectation to be whole. You only need to be present. To meet this moment with sincerity, even if you're scared, even if you feel small, even if you don't know what comes next. And in that meeting, love becomes possible again. Not love based on performance or appearance or worthiness, but love based on presence, on openness, on truth. You are not the voice that judges. You are the awareness that notices. You are not the past mistake. You are the capacity to learn from it. You are not frozen. You are fluid, living, changing, worthy. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical. The next time the inner critic appears, don't argue, don't collapse. Just notice. Watch the thought arise, linger, and fade. Don't label it as me. Don't wrap your worth around it. Instead, breathe. Stay present. Let the thought pass. You don't need to push it away. You don't need to hold it close. You just don't need to become it. This is the gift of non-self. It doesn't erase your existence. It liberates it. It reminds you that everything painful you've believed about yourself is just one moment in a river that never stops flowing. And you are not stuck. You are free to begin again. Now, and now, and now. As you begin to let go of harsh self-definitions, something subtle happens. The inner noise begins to slow. The stories you once believed about who you are start to fade, like fog lifting from a quiet lake. But beneath that fading noise, something else is revealed, not more answers, but more questions. A gentle ache, a space asking to be heard, and the only way to hear it is to stop speaking. There is a kind of silence that is not emptiness, not absence, not avoidance. It is alive. It is deep. It is what the Buddha called noble silence. A silence that holds, not hides. That opens, not shuts down. It is not about removing sound from your life. It is about removing distortion from your perception. This silence is not escape. It is meeting. And the one you meet when all else falls quiet is yourself. In the world, so much is filled with noise, external and internal. Devices hum, notifications buzz, thoughts spiral, voices rise, expectations press. And over time, the mind becomes used to running, always doing, always planning, always trying to control what comes next. Even the effort to love yourself can become just another task on a long list. But silence asks for something else. It asks you to stop seeking long enough to feel, to stay present long enough to notice, to make space for what hasn't been heard, not from the outside, but from within. Noble silence is not simply being quiet. It is the absence of reaction. It's the pause between thought and speech, the stillness between emotion and response. It's the moment you choose not to fill the space just to avoid discomfort. In that space, your inner world becomes clearer. Thoughts rise, but you no longer follow each one. Emotions appear, but you don't immediately analyze them. You begin to see the layers under the surface. The hunger for validation, the loneliness that was buried under busyness, the fatigue masked as irritability, the sadness tucked behind the smile. Noble silence is not passive. It's deeply active in a different way. It listens without fixing. It allows without rushing. It waits without needing to solve. And through that waiting, unmet needs rise into awareness. This practice helps reveal the ways you've been disconnected, not just from others, but from yourself. You begin to notice how often you interrupt your own emotions with thinking, how quickly you label discomfort as something to fix instead of feel, how often your thoughts jump in before your heart even has time to speak. In silence, the heart finally gets a voice. You may find that grief lives where you thought there was only numbness, or that longing exists beneath your habits of distraction, that what you really needed wasn't another task, but a moment of honest stillness. When you stop speaking not only outwardly, but inwardly, the walls begin to lower. You no longer use words as a shield. You begin to relate to your own presence in a new way, without commentary, without filters. In that quiet, self-love takes on a different shape. It becomes less about affirmations and more about deep listening. You begin to sense what your body has been trying to say, what your nervous system has been holding, what your breath has been asking for. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's real. The mind often searches for healing in more effort, more action, more change. But the heart sometimes just needs space to speak. Space it rarely gets in a noisy, fast world. Silence is the act of saying, I am here now with myself, and I'm not leaving. This kind of presence is healing, not because it gives you instant answers, but because it removes pressure. It allows your system to soften. It teaches you to trust that being with what is, without force, can reveal what needs attention. Through noble silence, you become more aware of your patterns, the urge to escape discomfort, the need to explain yourself, the pressure to perform. All of it becomes visible, not so you can judge it, but so you can understand it. Understanding replaces shame, and with understanding comes compassion. You begin to treat your own silence, not as emptiness, but as a kind of care, a kind of holding, a place where your emotions can arrive without needing to justify themselves. Even the most difficult feelings are softened when they are met with quiet attention, not because they disappear immediately, but because they are allowed to be real. Noble silence teaches you that nothing inside you is wrong, only unheard. And so you learn to sit, not to escape, but to stay, to let the body settle, to let the mind unclench, to let the inner child speak without interruption, to let sadness rise without needing to push it back down. In that practice, you start to notice the difference between being silent and being still. Being silent is about volume. Being still is about presence. It is the stillness that allows the silence to heal. This practice creates room for intuition to rise. The part of you that already knows what you need it speaks in whispers, not in shouts. And it can only be heard when you're quiet enough to listen. Sometimes what it tells you is simple: rest, breathe, let go, trust. Other times, it shows you the deeper pain you've been avoiding. And in that revelation, you don't crumble, you open. Because you're not fighting anymore. You're not resisting your own experience. You are receiving it. Silence is not about isolation. It is about connection. True connection. The kind that doesn't need performance, approval, or explanation. It's the place where presence meets reality without pushing it away. In silence, your heart becomes your home again. You no longer chase healing, you create the conditions for it to arrive. You no longer rush toward peace, you allow space for peace to emerge. There is a kind of safety that comes when you realize you can be with yourself, in stillness, without panic, that you don't need to fill every moment, that you don't need to explain your existence. That simply being quietly, openly, is enough. You start to feel your own rhythm. You begin to notice how much of your energy has gone into managing impressions, filling silence, proving worth. And you start letting go, not to collapse, but to return. This return is gentle. It asks nothing from you but presence. And presence, when offered with care, becomes the deepest form of love. Even 10 minutes of silence a day can shift something. Not because it changes your circumstances, but because it reconnects you to yourself. It reminds you that you are not the noise, not the identity, not the pressure. You are awareness, breathing here. And in that awareness, you realize something quietly profound. You don't need to be anyone else in this moment. You don't need to earn love. You don't need to fix the past. You don't need to rush forward. You just need to stay with what's here, stay with yourself. Silence becomes not a practice, but a relationship with presence, with inner knowing, with kindness, a relationship that doesn't need many words, because it speaks through stillness. And over time, you begin to crave this space. Not because it's always comfortable, but because it's always honest. It becomes your anchor, your retreat, your reset. You start to carry that stillness with you, even into the noise. The world doesn't get quieter, but you do. You move more slowly, you speak more thoughtfully, you listen more deeply, not just to others, but to yourself. This is the gift of noble silence. Not a break from life, but a return to it. A return to clarity, to presence, to softness. And in that return, you finally hear what's been waiting all along. A voice not of judgment, but of care. A voice not loud, but true. A voice that says, you've always been enough, even in silence, especially there. When you begin to listen deeply, without interrupting your inner world, you start to uncover a truth that may feel hard to face at first. There are things in your past that still hurt. Moments you wish had gone differently. Words you said you wish you hadn't. Choices you carry like stones in your pocket. In the silence, those memories return not to punish you, but to be healed. They rise not as enemies, but as invitations. And what you do with them now will shape how you carry yourself forward. In the teachings of karma, most people hear the word and think of punishment, cause and effect, but laced with fear, as if every misstep dooms you, as if your past locks you out of peace. But that is a misunderstanding. Karma isn't a sentence, it's a seed, and how you relate to it determines whether you grow or stay stuck. Karma means that every action leaves an imprint, but imprints are not chains, they are patterns. And patterns can be understood, shifted, softened. There is no karmic law that says you must be defined by who you were. Karma only asks, what are you doing now? The pain you feel over past mistakes is not karma punishing you. It's your deeper self recognizing that something is out of alignment. It's a signal not to spiral in shame, but to pause, reflect, and respond with care. To hold karma this way is to hold your past differently, not as a burden, but as a teacher, not as something broken, but something that reveals your strength. There is an art from Japan called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, it fills them with something precious. The broken parts become the most beautiful. The damage isn't covered up, it's honored. This is how you can hold your karma. Not to ignore what happened, not to pretend it didn't matter, but to see the cracks in your story as places where healing can shine through. The moments you regret become entry points into self-compassion. The choices you wish you could take back become opportunities to grow new roots in wisdom. You are not meant to be untouched by life. You are meant to be shaped by it, softened by it, made whole through it. If you have caused harm to others or to yourself, karma invites you to face that with openness. Not to collapse into guilt, but to bring awareness to your impact. Regret, when met with presence, becomes a form of accountability. And accountability, when paired with compassion, becomes transformation. What matters most is your relationship with the present moment. What are you planting now? How are you responding now? The seeds of the past may still be blooming, but you are the one who waters what grows next. Karma is alive. It changes with your actions, your thoughts, your intentions. When you act from awareness and love, you begin to reshape the direction of your life, not by erasing the past, but by choosing something new from this moment forward. This requires a shift in perspective, one that stops seeing mistakes as evidence of failure and starts seeing them as chapters in a story that is still being written. Not everything painful is permanent. Not every scar is shameful. Not every misstep means you're lost. You can choose to hold your past as a map, not of everything that went wrong, but of everything that has led you to understanding. The Buddhist path does not teach perfection. It teaches presence. It teaches that even if you fell down 1,000 times, each time you rise is an act of awakening. Each time you choose kindness over harshness to yourself or others, you soften the karmic imprint of harm. Each time you respond with patience instead of reaction, you shift the energy of your life. There is no one watching you to keep score. There is no cosmic punishment system. There is only the flow of cause and effect, and your capacity to meet it with clarity. Sometimes the hardest karma is not what happens outside you, but the emotional patterns you carry. Cycles of self-blame, habits of avoidance, responses that come before you even think. These too are karma, and they are not permanent. You can begin to bring awareness to them. You can ask, without judgment, what story is repeating here? What feeling am I avoiding? What am I believing about myself that keeps me in pain? And then, in that clarity, you can choose differently. This choosing is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as pausing before speaking, breathing instead of reacting, apologizing without defending, forgiving without forgetting. Karma is shaped in small choices, and the gold in your healing is built from those choices, one breath at a time. Even the most painful chapters can teach you how to live more wisely. That relationship you lost taught you what love isn't. That decision you regret showed you your boundaries. That moment you weren't proud of revealed where you were hurting. You begin to see that you are not the same person who made those choices. You are the one who now sees them clearly. You are the one growing new intentions from old wounds. This kind of healing doesn't deny what happened. It simply refuses to let it be the end of the story. Karma teaches that energy continues. But what you do with that energy, how you shape it, how you redirect it, how you meet it, is up to you. You can use it to build wisdom, to grow empathy, to become more gentle, not more guarded. The cracks in your life are not signs of weakness. They are places where the light can shine through. They are where your deepest self begins to speak. They are where you become real. And in that realness, you begin to feel something return. Not perfection, not control, but integrity. You begin to live more honestly, speak more clearly, act more consciously. You are no longer running from your past. You are walking with it, not as a weight, but as a companion that taught you how to begin again. In this way, karma becomes not a punishment, but a path. A living reminder that everything you do matters not because you must be flawless, but because your presence carries power. Even when you've hurt someone, you can repair. Even when you've hurt yourself, you can choose differently now. You are not broken. You are in the process of being reshaped by truth. And truth always leads to freedom. So you keep showing up. You keep practicing. You keep choosing the next kind thing, the next honest word, the next conscious step. And as you do, you begin to see your life through different eyes, not as a series of mistakes, but as a beautiful, complicated, human unfolding. You no longer try to erase the past. You weave it into the person you are becoming, with compassion, with patience, with gold. And that gold, the wisdom that came from breaking and mending, becomes part of your strength. It becomes part of your love. It becomes part of your peace. When you begin to see your past through eyes of wisdom, when you stop trying to erase what once hurt and instead learn to honor it, something unexpected starts to rise. A new kind of love. One that doesn't come from trying to be better or more worthy. One that isn't earned by healing fast or forgiving quickly. A love that simply arrives as you soften into your own presence, not performative. Not self-centered, quiet, steady, real. But even that, love needs direction. It needs roots. Without guidance, even love can become confusing. Too much, and it clings. Too little, and it disappears. Some days it feels like compassion, other days like pressure. That's why the Buddha offered a clear path, not just of love in theory, but of love lived fully, love held in balance, love that grows in 4 directions. This path is called the Brahma Viharas, the 4 immeasurable states of heart and mind, 4 ways of relating to yourself and the world that are rooted in clarity, not craving. They are not emotions you chase. They are inner qualities you cultivate, and together they form a complete foundation for self-love that doesn't lose itself in ego, guilt, or imbalance. The first is metta-loving kindness, not a feeling but a wish, a gentle offering of goodwill. For others, yes, but also for yourself. To hold yourself with care even when you feel undeserving. To meet your life with gentleness even when it's hard. This is the beginning of self-love, not to demand affection, but to practice kindness without condition. Not just when you succeed, not just when you're calm, but when you're overwhelmed, disappointed, afraid. Loving kindness teaches you to stop waiting to feel lovable and start practicing loving. Even if all you can say is, "May I be safe, may I be well, may I be kind to myself." That wish, repeated over time, changes how you hold your own heart. Next is karuna compassion. It goes beyond kindness. It meets pain where it lives. It says, "I see your suffering, and I won't turn away." Self-compassion means you no longer scold yourself for struggling. You no longer rush your healing. You stop asking why you're still feeling what you feel and start offering yourself the same tenderness you would offer a dear friend. This doesn't mean indulgence or making excuses. It means meeting the wound without judgment, letting pain be pain so it can move through. Compassion doesn't try to fix everything right away. It stays present. It allows. It holds space. It recognizes that being human is messy and beautiful, and often both at the same time. When you begin to practice compassion for your own suffering, you stop reinforcing the false belief that you need to be flawless to be loved. Then comes mudita, sympathetic joy. This one can feel harder, especially when your own life feels heavy. But it is vital. It teaches you how to celebrate, not out of comparison, not out of competition, but out of shared humanity. Self-directed mudita means allowing yourself to feel joy without guilt, to be happy when things go well, to laugh without wondering if you're allowed, to feel pleasure in small things, a clear breath, a warm touch, a moment of connection without thinking it must be earned. Joy that comes from presence, not perfection. This is where self-love becomes expansive, where it stops being just about soothing and starts being about aliveness. When you give yourself permission to feel joy, even when everything isn't fixed, you open your heart to life as it is, and that joy becomes a source of resilience. Finally, upekkha, equanimity, the balance that holds all the rest. Without it, love becomes tangled, compassion turns into overwhelm, joy becomes attachment. But with equanimity, you learn to stay centered. You learn to care without clinging. You learn to feel deeply without being swallowed. In yourself, this looks like being with your experience as it unfolds, without pushing it away and without chasing it. It means trusting your inner ground, even when life moves in waves. It doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means being stable enough to feel everything. When you practice equanimity, you stop trying to control what happens and start learning how to respond wisely. You begin to trust that you can hold joy and sorrow, ease and pain, praise and blame, not because you've shut your heart down, but because your heart has grown strong enough to stay open. Together, these four, metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, become a compass. Not a list of qualities to perfect, but living directions to return to. When you feel lost, you check. Am I being kind? Am I meeting this with compassion? Am I allowing joy? Am I balanced? They keep you from swinging too far in any one direction, from becoming overly self-critical or emotionally detached, from denying your pain or clinging to your happiness. They keep your love grounded, flexible, real. They also help you love without ego, because they are not about boosting your self-image. They are about seeing clearly, loving what is, not what should be, and that includes yourself. You begin to notice the places where your self-love has become conditional. I'll be kind to myself when I stop making this mistake. I'll let myself rest when I've done enough. I'll feel joy when I finally fix everything. The Brahma Viharas dissolve these conditions. They remind you that kindness is available now, compassion is available now, joy is available now, balance is available now. They teach you that love is not something you chase, it's something you cultivate. Not by forcing it, but by tending to it, watering it, returning to it. When you practice the four immeasurables, you begin to see how love grows from attention, not ambition, from care, not control. And you begin to extend that same understanding to others. Because the more you hold yourself with patience, the more you can hold others without judgment. The more you meet your pain with compassion, the more you can recognize pain in others without needing to fix it. The more you celebrate your own joy, the less you feel envy. The more balance you hold within, the more peaceful your relationships become. But it always begins within. You don't practice these to be perfect. You practice because they're the soil of a life rooted in peace. And peace doesn't come from escaping yourself. It comes from returning, again and again, to presence, to kindness, to the breath, to the moment. That return is the practice. That return is the path. The Brahma Viharas are not distant ideals. They are human capacities. They already exist in you. You've felt them before, brief moments of warmth, of softness, of joy, of steadiness. Practicing means making space for those moments to grow, giving them your attention, trusting that, With time, they shape how you live and love. You begin to live not from habit, but from intention, not from defense, but from openness, not from fear, but from care. And care, true care, never comes with conditions. It simply stays, breath by breath, softly, quietly, fully. This is what balanced self-love looks like. Not loud, not inflated, just honest, just grounded, just enough. And from that ground, everything begins to grow. When love becomes balanced, when kindness is steady and joy is shared without comparison, something profound begins to open beneath it all. You stop holding your experiences so tightly. You stop needing each feeling to stay. You begin to sense there is something deeper beneath all the doing, all the striving, all the becoming. Not a thing to grasp, but a space to rest into. And this is where many turn away, because it feels unfamiliar. To release even the idea of who you are, to let go of fixed identity, even for a moment, can feel like stepping into the unknown. But what arises in that unknown is not fear. It is freedom. There is a teaching at the heart of Buddhist understanding that holds this truth gently, shunyata, or emptiness. Often misunderstood, often feared, yet never meant to be cold. Emptiness is not absence. It is not despair. It is the quiet space where transformation becomes possible. It is what allows new life to grow where old clinging once lived. Emptiness is not the denial of life. It is what gives life room to move. The mind, by habit, tries to solidify everything. It turns moments into identities, pain into personality, emotions into lifelong narratives. It makes things stick because it believes that to let go is to lose something essential. But this tightness, this grasping, is what creates so much of your suffering. The belief that everything must be held in place, that every thought means something permanent, that every emotion defines you. And so, the idea of emptiness feels threatening, because it seems to suggest that nothing matters. But the truth is, emptiness means that everything can matter because nothing is fixed. It means that no emotion, no judgment, no habit defines your essence. There is space between all things. And in that space is where compassion grows. When you understand emptiness directly, you stop believing the stories that once held you captive. The thought that you are too broken, the feeling that you're not lovable, the idea that your past defines you. These thoughts may still come, but they no longer root so deeply. You begin to sense that they are appearances real, but passing, influential, but not absolute. You don't need to destroy the stories. You only need to see that they're not solid. And once you see that, you are free to relate to them with care instead of fear. This is what emptiness offers. It loosens the grip. It softens the edges. It gives you space to breathe. You realize you are not a fixed self, reacting to a fixed world. You are awareness, flowing, responsive, ever-changing. This doesn't mean life loses meaning. It means you get to choose what meaning you give, not as a way to escape truth, but as a way to live it more consciously. You start asking different questions, not who am I really, but how can I respond with wisdom right now? Not what should I be, but what is needed here from a place of love. The fixed self falls away, and what remains is freedom. Emptiness is not hollow. It's full of potential. It's the field before the seed is planted, the space between breath and thought, the pause before response. It is the ground from which compassion, insight, and transformation rise naturally. The idea of identity as fixed is what leads to judgment. If you are always this, then change feels threatening. But when you see that you are a fluid process, that everything you experience is arising due to conditions and will eventually pass, you stop needing to be so rigid. There is safety in that. Not because things are predictable, but because you no longer need them to be. You can let things pass without grasping. You can let go without fear of losing who you are, because who you are is not a fixed story. It's a dynamic, alive experience, and emptiness is the canvas that allows it to move. In daily life, this becomes practical. You feel anger, but you don't hold on to it. It moves through you like wind through branches. You feel sadness, but you stop turning it into a conclusion about your life. You begin to experience emotions directly, without attaching meaning that distorts them. This gives your inner world more space, and in that space, compassion becomes easier. Forgiveness feels more natural. Judgment softens, because you see that no one is one thing, forever, not even you. You also stop defining yourself by your achievements, your roles, your image. These things may still exist, but they no longer form the core of your identity. You stop grasping for praise or hiding from criticism. You become less reactive because there's no tight sense of self to defend. Just this breath, this body, this moment. When your identity is not fixed, your value doesn't depend on doing everything right. You are no longer trapped by the need to protect who you think you are. You can admit mistakes without shame. You can accept compliments without clinging. You can face change without losing your ground. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you responsive. You begin to act not from fear of loss, but from clarity, not to prove yourself, but to express presence. Even suffering changes when seen through this lens. It becomes something to meet, not something to avoid. It's seen as arising from causes and conditions, not from some permanent flaw in who you are. And that changes how you relate to it. You stop blaming. You stop resisting. You start resisting. In that listening, healing begins. The mind that understands emptiness becomes less caught in struggle. It holds life more gently. It allows others to be who they are without needing to change them. It allows space for pain, but also for peace. It is no longer trapped in the illusion that things must stay the same to feel safe. You begin to sense a kind of intimacy with life. Because nothing is solid, everything can be touched. Because nothing is fixed, everything can be held. This is not theory. It is a way of being. And it is discovered slowly, through practice, through presence, through letting go of the need to define everything. You start small. You notice when you are holding on too tightly to a thought. You see when you are making a feeling into a fact. You pause. You breathe. You soften. You remember, this too will pass. That remembrance is freedom. You no longer need to protect an identity. You can simply respond with wisdom again and again. And through this, life becomes more spacious. Not because pain disappears, but because it no longer defines the whole landscape. There is more room, more breath, more choice. You begin to see beauty in the impermanent, because it teaches you to appreciate without clinging. You begin to see depth in the uncertain, because it reminds you to stay curious. Emptiness is not cold, it is open, and in that openness you find a new kind of warmth, not based on certainty, but on presence. You discover that compassion doesn't need a reason, that love doesn't require a perfect identity, that healing doesn't come from fixing, but from meeting. The space of emptiness becomes the space of kindness, the space where you can rest, the space where you can grow. And from that space, you begin to live not as a fixed self, but as a flowing awareness, kind, clear, alive. This is the heart of emptiness, not absence, not void, but freedom. And in that freedom, the deepest kind of self-compassion becomes possible, because now nothing in you is permanent. And so, nothing is beyond care. Nothing is unworthy of love. You don't have to chase who you were. You don't have to defend who you are. You don't have to fear who you will become. You simply return to this space over and over, and in that returning, you remember what's always been true. There is room for all of you here, and in that room, you are free. The more you rest in spaciousness, the more clearly you begin to see what you've been carrying, not just the emotions or memories, but the patterns. The subtle loops you move through again and again, thoughts that trigger feelings, feelings that drive reactions, reactions that reinforce painful beliefs. It's not random, and it's not your fault. But it's also not permanent. There is a map for this, a teaching that gently shows you how suffering builds itself, piece by piece. It's not punishment, it's a pattern, and that pattern can be seen, it can be understood. And when it's understood, it can be rewritten. This is the law of dependent origination, paticca samuppada, a core insight of the Buddha's teaching. It reveals the chain of cause and effect, not as an abstract theory, but as a lived reality inside you. It shows how suffering isn't something that appears out of nowhere. It has a beginning, it has fuel, and when the fuel is no longer added, it begins to dissolve. At the center of this law is a simple truth. Nothing arises independently. No emotion, no thought, no belief stands alone. Everything depends on conditions. When those conditions are present, the experience arises. When they change, the experience fades. For example, the belief that you are not good enough didn't appear on its own. It may have been shaped by early criticism, by trauma, by societal pressure, by repeated rejection. Over time, those experiences planted seeds. Each time you felt misunderstood, those seeds were watered. Eventually, the story grew, and now it lives as if it's truth. But it isn't truth. It's a result, and that means it can be interrupted. The chain of suffering usually begins with contact. Something is seen, heard, remembered, or felt. That contact triggers sensation, which brings up feeling pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The mind doesn't stop there. It adds craving or resistance. Then comes identification. You start to take it personally. The discomfort becomes your discomfort. The fear becomes your flaw. The thought becomes your identity. And then action follows. You react based on the story. Maybe you withdraw, maybe you lash out, maybe you numb. That reaction creates more conditions, more evidence for the story. And so the cycle repeats. What makes this process powerful is not that it happens, it's that you can see it while it happens. And that moment of awareness is the beginning of freedom. You don't need to fight every thought. You don't need to suppress every emotion. You just need to understand what's fueling them. When you see the links, you stop being trapped by them. Let's say you notice a feeling of unworthiness rise when someone doesn't respond to your message. The old story appears. They don't care. That story brings tightness, maybe shame, maybe anger. You feel the urge to protect or explain yourself. But instead of reacting, you pause. You ask, what led to this feeling? Maybe there was contact, the silence. Then sensation, the body tenses. Then the feeling unpleasant. Then the thought, they're rejecting me. Then the belief, I must not matter. And that belief shapes your behavior. Now you've seen the links, and just seeing them loosens their power. You realize it's not the silence that hurts. It's the story built on that silence. And that story comes from past wounds, not this present moment. This is the insight that breaks the loop. You begin to notice that not every emotion needs a storyline. Not every discomfort needs to mean something about you. You start catching the chain earlier, before the belief hardens, before the reaction takes hold. And in that early seeing, you create space. In that space, a new choice becomes possible. This isn't about controlling your feelings. It's about interrupting the automatic reaction to them, the craving for things to be different, the aversion to discomfort, The tendency to personalize everything. With consistent awareness, you start choosing differently. You respond instead of reacting. You stay curious instead of collapsing. You begin to replace the old narrative with a new understanding. This is just a pattern, not a personal failure, not a fixed identity, just a habit made of many conditions, now seen clearly. That clear seeing is what dissolves it. This process also teaches you compassion. You realize that others, too, are moving through their own chains of cause and effect. Their harsh words may come from pain. Their silence may come from fear. Their actions, like yours, are shaped by unseen forces. When you understand the links in your own suffering, you become less reactive to others. You stop taking things so personally. You start to meet people where they are, not where your story says they should be. You also begin to speak to yourself more gently. When pain arises, you ask not, "What's wrong with me?" but "What is this built on?" When judgment appears, you trace it back to comparison, to fear, to the craving for control. And again, you pause, you breathe, you see it clearly. And in that clarity, you make space for care. This is how you rewrite the story. Not with force, not by pretending the old one never existed, but by seeing how it was built and choosing not to build it again. Every time you bring awareness to the chain, you loosen it, you weaken the habit, you become less defined by the past and more open to the present. This doesn't make your life perfect. It makes it honest. You still feel, you still stumble, but now you know why, and that knowing becomes a source of strength. You begin to notice the subtle points of contact that once went unseen, the tightness in your jaw before you react, the flicker of shame before the defense, the quick assumption before the closing down. Each of these is a doorway, not to fix, but to understand. And through that understanding, a new story begins to take shape. One where pain is met with presence, not panic. One where discomfort is explored, not feared. One where thoughts are seen as temporary, not absolute. One where self-worth is not dictated by emotion, but supported by insight. This new story is not written all at once. It's built gently, breath by breath, moment by moment, each time you choose awareness over autopilot. And as you keep choosing, the old loops lose energy. The false identities lose their grip. What once felt like truth starts to feel like memory. Not erased, but no longer in control. You are no longer living inside someone else's story about you. You are writing your own, not with fantasy, but with deep clarity. You are shaping it with kindness, with wisdom, with each moment of seeing. The law of dependent origination is not a rule to follow. It's a mirror, a way of looking that reveals what was hidden. And what it reveals is not your flaw, it's your freedom. Because when you understand what gives rise to suffering, you understand how not to feed it. When you see what supports peace, you learn how to nourish it. You are not broken, you are patterned, and patterns can change. The story of self-worth, of who you are, of how you live, it's still being written, and now you hold the pen. Once you begin to see the chain of your suffering clearly, it becomes harder to keep feeding it unconsciously. You notice when reactions are building. You recognize the moment you start slipping into old roles. And you begin to ask better questions, not "What's wrong with me?" but "What is this really asking for?" That question opens a door, because beneath so many patterns is a powerful force that often goes unnoticed: desire. Desire, in itself, is not the problem. It is natural to want connection, safety, growth, and peace. But not all desire leads to freedom. Some pulls you deeper into dissatisfaction. Others point you toward inner clarity. The difference is subtle but important, and the Buddha gave us language for both. He called one tanha and the other chanda. Understanding the difference between them is one of the most important steps in learning how to love yourself in a healthy, grounded way. Without this distinction, it's easy to confuse compulsive striving with genuine aspiration. You may believe you're growing when really you're grasping. You may think you're practicing self-care when in fact you're avoiding discomfort. These distortions aren't because you're doing something wrong, they come from not recognizing what's really driving your actions. Tanha is the craving that pulls you out of presence. It is the urge that arises from a sense of lack, a feeling that something is missing and must be filled now. It doesn't come with clarity. It comes with tension. You feel it when you chase validation, needing someone to reassure your worth. You feel it when you scroll endlessly, hoping something will finally quiet your restlessness. It shows up in subtle ways: perfectionism, comparison, needing to be noticed, or becoming addicted to constant improvement. It never feels like enough, because it's rooted in a belief that you are not enough. When you act from tanha, even good things can become painful. You might try to meditate, but secretly hope it makes you more lovable. You might pursue personal growth, but measure your worth against how much you've achieved. You try to love yourself, but only if you meet certain conditions. This isn't love. It's pressure disguised as purpose, and the more you feed it, the more it feeds itself. Tanha is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers, but it always carries that same tightness, the sense that something must change before you can rest. It convinces you that peace lies just one accomplishment away, one compliment away, one correction away. And the truth is, even when you get what it wanted, the craving doesn't end. It shifts to something else. It never really lands. Chanda, on the other hand, is a different kind of energy. It is also a form of desire, but it arises from presence, not lack. It is the healthy urge to grow because you care, not because you're afraid. It's the movement toward well-being that doesn't demand perfection. It's wanting to heal not because you're broken, but because you love what's possible. Chanda is not about grasping for the future, it's about honoring what wants to unfold from within. This is the kind of desire that fuels real self-love. It moves you to rest when your body needs it, to reflect when your mind is overwhelmed, to speak gently to yourself, not because someone told you to, but because you've learned that harshness doesn't help. Chanda has clarity. It sees where you're going, but it also stays grounded in where you are. When your self-love is guided by Chanda, you can pursue growth without self-rejection. You can want more for yourself without believing you are not enough now. You can make changes, not from shame, but from care. This shift is subtle, but life-changing, because the outer action might look the same. Two people might both decide to start meditating. One is driven by tanha, a hope that it will make them more peaceful, more worthy, more acceptable. The other is moved by chanda, an inner pull toward clarity, curiosity, and kindness. The difference is not in the practice, it's in the energy behind it. Recognizing this energy in your own life takes patience. It means paying attention to the body, the breath, the feeling in the chest. Craving feels tight. It feels urgent. It feels like something must happen now. Chanda feels clear. It feels open. It feels like you're already okay, and also you're invited to grow. There is no shame in having craving. It is human. The goal is not to eliminate all desire. The goal is to understand it, to see it clearly, to ask, is this coming from fear or care? From absence or connection? From pressure or presence? When you begin to discern the difference, your choices become more rooted. You don't get swept away by every impulse. You don't fall for the illusion that worth is somewhere else. You start acting from the part of you that already trusts life, that already sees value in who you are, that doesn't need to be constantly fixed, but is always willing to listen. This understanding also helps you stop judging yourself for wanting things. There is nothing wrong with having goals, with seeking comfort, with wanting to feel good in your own skin. What matters is how you relate to those wants. Do they pull you out of yourself or bring you back home? Do they lead to exhaustion or to balance? You begin to sense when your self-care has become self-escape, when your goals have become distractions, when your striving is no longer about honoring your truth, but about proving your worth. And with that clarity, you can stop, breathe, listen, and return to Chanda. Returning doesn't mean giving up. It means realigning. It means moving forward without losing yourself in the process. It means letting desire be your ally, not your master. When you live from this place, even ambition changes. You still work toward things, but not from the same urgency. You pursue health, not to perfect your body, but to care for your vessel. You grow, not to become someone else, but to become more connected to yourself. You relate to others, not from a need to be chosen, but from a desire to share joy. This kind of self-love doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't demand attention, but it's steady, it's rooted. It gives you a compass that can guide you through all the noise. And the more you stay close to it, the more resilient you become, because you are no longer at the mercy of every craving. You no longer believe that peace is somewhere far away. You stop measuring your worth against the scale of constant improvement. You let yourself rest. You let yourself be. You let yourself want what is wise, not what is frantic. Over time, Chanda helps you build a life that is both nourishing and real. A life where goals are shaped by care, where effort is balanced with rest, where the journey is not a sprint, but a steady walk inward. This is the path of wise desire, the path of wanting without grasping, of growing without running, of loving yourself from the inside, not because you must become better, but because you're already worth the effort. When you begin to recognize the difference between craving and wise desire, you stop chasing approval disguised as growth. You choose goals that come from care rather than pressure. The decisions you make begin to reflect a deeper understanding of your needs rather than old habits of self-abandonment. But even with this clarity, another layer still holds influence: the lens through which you view yourself. Because what you see determines how you respond. And without shifting that lens, even the wisest intentions can become distorted. This is where the power of samadhi, right view, becomes essential. It is not just a concept to study. It is the foundation of how you perceive the world, your experiences, and your identity. When the view is clouded, everything is misunderstood. When it is clear, even difficulty becomes manageable. Right view is not about holding the correct opinions. It's about seeing reality as it is. And one of the most damaging distortions it corrects is toxic self-perception, the deeply rooted belief that you are not good enough, that you are defective, unworthy, or beyond repair. These beliefs rarely come from a single moment. They are built through years of misunderstanding, cultural conditioning, unprocessed pain, and repeated narratives. They don't simply appear in the mind, they grow through misperception, through the view that your worth is dependent on performance, image, or perfection. Right view does not ask you to ignore the pain you've been through. It simply asks you to question the conclusions you've drawn from it. You may have been rejected, but that does not mean you are unlovable. You may have failed, but that does not mean you are incapable. You may have made mistakes, but that does not mean you are bad. When you see clearly, you separate the event from the identity. You stop letting temporary experiences define your permanent sense of self. You understand that pain is a part of life, but suffering grows when you internalize that pain as a personal flaw. Applying right view begins with observation. You notice how your mind labels you, not just in obvious moments, but in subtle thoughts throughout the day. When you spill something, the voice says, "I'm so stupid." When you forget something, it says, "I can't do anything right." These thoughts seem harmless at first, but repeated enough, they become the way you view yourself. Right view allows you to pause and ask, is this true? Is this permanent? Is this the whole story? This kind of reflection brings awareness to automatic thought patterns. You begin to see them not as facts, but as conditioned responses. You become more curious, less reactive. Instead of agreeing with the inner critic, you investigate. You ask what it's trying to protect. You uncover the old beliefs it's built on. You offer space rather than resistance. This shift is not about forcing positivity. It's about aligning your perception with reality. You stop believing you are the voice in your head and start recognizing you are the one who hears it. That separation creates freedom. It gives you room to choose a different response, not one rooted in fear, but in understanding. Right view also transforms how you relate to emotions. Without it, difficult feelings are seen as problems. With it, they are seen as signals. Sadness becomes a call for care. Anger becomes a sign of violated boundaries. Anxiety becomes a request for safety. Emotions are no longer seen as threats to be avoided, but as messengers to be heard. When your perception changes, so does your behavior. You stop avoiding what makes you uncomfortable. You stop punishing yourself for not feeling good all the time. You start meeting your experience with more honesty and less resistance. You also stop comparing your inner world to other people's outside. You no longer use someone else's success to measure your value. You understand that what you see in others is not the whole story, just as others can't see the whole of you. This awareness reduces envy and builds empathy. You become less interested in proving yourself and more interested in knowing yourself. Right view helps you understand cause and effect with more precision. You no longer blame yourself blindly for outcomes. You see that conditions give rise to results. If you struggled with something, it doesn't mean you're weak, it means there were causes. And those causes can be studied, understood, and changed. This understanding builds confidence. Because if your suffering is not fixed, if your identity is not set, then growth is not only possible, it's natural. You no longer need to strive to become someone better. You begin to allow yourself to unfold into someone more true. Right view teaches that everything you experience is part of a web of conditions. Your thoughts, behaviors, and even your identity are not isolated. They are shaped by environment, relationships, memories, and beliefs. And when those conditions shift, you shift. This doesn't make you unstable, it makes you adaptable. Toxic self-perception thrives in isolation. It grows when you believe you are the only one struggling. But right view reveals the truth of shared humanity. Everyone suffers. Everyone has wounds. Everyone carries burdens you can't see. This realization softens judgment both toward others and toward yourself. You begin to speak more gently to yourself. Not because you're trying to be nice, but because you understand that harshness is not wisdom. You stop calling yourself names when you're tired or overwhelmed. You stop using your pain as evidence that you're failing. You start choosing words that support healing rather than shame. Right view also teaches you to value intention. Instead of measuring your worth by results, you begin to ask, was I acting from sincerity? Did I try to bring presence even if I didn't get it right? This shift reduces anxiety. It removes the pressure to be perfect and replaces it with a commitment to stay honest. You become less interested in proving yourself and more interested in being yourself. You stop performing roles to earn love. You stop pretending to be unaffected when you're hurting. You stop hiding parts of yourself to stay acceptable. Right view gives you permission to be whole. And being whole includes your imperfection. You realize that growth is not a straight line. Healing is not always visible. Some of the deepest progress happens when you learn to stay with yourself, even when things are messy. Right view also brings clarity to your relationships. You stop seeking others to fill a void in you. You stop expecting people to rescue you from your emotions. You take responsibility for your inner world, not by controlling it, but by understanding it. With this perspective, even failure becomes something you can meet with dignity. You stop seeing it as proof of inadequacy and begin to see it as part of the process. You learn from it. You adjust. You continue, not because you are strong in the conventional sense, but because you have stopped believing that struggle defines you. This way of seeing also brings lightness. You begin to laugh more, even at your own mistakes. You don't take your thoughts so seriously. You recognize how the mind exaggerates, how it tells stories that sound dramatic but aren't true. And in that recognition, you step back, you smile, you breathe. Right view becomes a refuge, a place you return to when the mind is loud, when the heart is heavy, when the world feels overwhelming. It reminds you that clarity is always possible, that even when you feel lost, the way forward begins with how you see. And when you begin to see clearly, self-love is no longer something you try to achieve. It becomes something you express, not through grand gestures, but through quiet consistency, through how you talk to yourself, through how you meet each moment, through how you return, again and again, to the truth of your own worth. Right view does not ask you to deny your pain. It simply invites you to stop misinterpreting it, to see it not as proof of failure, but as part of the journey. To understand that healing is not about eliminating struggle, but about changing how you see it and how you respond. And in that response, you begin to reshape your life, not by changing everything outside, but by changing what you believe inside. You live with more ease, more presence, more compassion. And that compassion extends outward, because when you stop seeing yourself as broken, you stop needing to fix everyone else. You begin to live with less judgment and more understanding. You become more available to yourself, to others, to life. Not because things are perfect, but because you no longer expect them to be. Right view transforms everything, not by changing what happens, but by changing how you relate to it. And that shift from confusion to clarity, from fear to compassion, is the foundation of lasting self-love. When your view begins to shift, when you stop believing every critical thought and start meeting yourself with clarity, something deeper begins to surface. Beneath the thoughts, beneath the narratives, there is still the rawness of experience, the heaviness that sits quietly in the body, the ache that words can't always touch. No matter how much insight you develop, pain still arises. No matter how much you grow, life still delivers uncertainty, loss, and heartbreak. The difference now is how you relate to it. This is where true healing begins, not in escaping suffering, but in turning toward it, not with resistance, but with warmth, not to be consumed by it, but to finally meet it without fear. The Buddha spoke of dukkha, the first noble truth, often translated as suffering, but it carries more nuance as discomfort, instability, dissatisfaction. That feeling that things aren't quite how you want them to be. It exists in the mind, in the body, in your daily life. It comes in big waves and in subtle undercurrents. And while most of the world runs from it, Buddhist practice teaches a different path, one that doesn't seek to fix it, escape it, or numb it, but to accept it without resistance. This does not mean liking suffering. It doesn't mean agreeing with it or resigning to it. Acceptance in this context means stopping the inner war. It means allowing what is already here to be seen fully, gently, and without pushing it away. When you resist pain, it multiplies. The fear of feeling it adds another layer. The shame about having it adds more. The judgment that it shouldn't be happening builds another wall. Soon, The original discomfort is wrapped in layers of suffering that make it even harder to bear. But when you turn toward dukkha with tenderness, something begins to change. You start to feel less trapped, less guarded. The pain may still be present, but it's not attacking you anymore. You stop bracing, you stop contracting, you start listening. This kind of acceptance is not a passive collapse. It's an active opening, a willingness to be present with what hurts, because pushing it away has only deepened the wound. You learn to sit with sadness without needing to explain it, to allow grief without trying to rush through it, to be with fear without letting it control your decisions. And in that sitting, that allowing, a new kind of strength is formed, a strength that doesn't need to be hard, a strength that comes from gentleness. The mind may say, "This shouldn't be happening." The body may tense in reaction, but you stay, you breathe, you recognize the mind's protest as just another movement of thought. You recognize the tension as an old habit of self-protection, and slowly you soften. Each moment of non-resistance is a moment of healing, not because it removes the pain, but because it changes your relationship with it. You stop being its victim, you become its witness. This changes your self-perception in a profound way. You begin to realize that suffering does not make you weak, that pain does not mean you're failing, that struggling is not proof you're broken. You start to understand that being with pain is not the same as being consumed by it. You learn to hold it without collapsing. This process brings honesty. You can finally admit when you're hurting without the need to explain or justify it. You no longer feel the pressure to perform strength. You begin to see vulnerability not as something to hide, but as something sacred. Self-acceptance deepens here, because when you allow suffering to be part of your experience, you stop judging yourself for being human. You stop expecting constant ease. You stop resenting discomfort as a sign of deficiency, and that changes everything. You become more real, more compassionate, more grounded. You stop fighting reality and start moving with it. This doesn't mean giving in to despair. It means letting go of the fight against what already is. It means allowing the storm to pass through you instead of trying to block the sky. You learn to trust that you can feel difficult things without becoming them, that sadness can be met with softness, that fear can be held with breath, that loneliness can be witnessed with care. In doing this, you start to build inner safety not by avoiding pain, but by learning how to stay with it without judgment. That safety becomes the foundation for deeper healing. The more you practice this, the more you start to see suffering as part of the human journey, not a personal flaw. You look at others with more compassion. You stop assuming everyone else has it figured out. You understand that beneath every mask, every reaction, every silence, there may be hidden pain. This awareness fosters connection. It reminds you that you are not alone in your suffering, that you never were. That pain is not a defect to be ashamed of, but a bridge that connects you to the heart of others. You begin to speak more kindly to yourself. When something hurts, instead of blaming yourself for feeling it, you offer space. You ask what is needed. You hold yourself with the same care you would offer someone you love. This care becomes more natural the more you practice. You stop trying to bypass the hard parts. You stop needing everything to feel good in order to feel worthy. You recognize that even in the middle of pain, love is possible. Radical self-acceptance is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice of meeting whatever arises with less resistance. It's choosing to soften rather than harden, to listen rather than suppress, to stay rather than escape. You start to redefine what healing means. It no longer means removing all discomfort. It means becoming more skillful at being with it, more honest in naming it, more compassionate in responding to it. This gives you resilience, and not the kind that pushes through everything, but the kind that bends without breaking, that holds without controlling, that faces truth without fear. Your relationship with your own pain transforms. You stop hiding from it. You start learning from it. You begin to see that the moments that hurt the most often carry the most insight if you're willing to listen. This listening is not easy at first. It may feel unfamiliar, but over time, it becomes your strength. Because through it, you find your way back to yourself not as someone to be fixed, but as someone to be met. Pain loses its sharpness when it is no longer resisted. Suffering becomes bearable when it is no longer layered with judgment. And you begin to feel a sense of peace, not because everything is easy, but because you've stopped pretending it has to be. This is the heart of accepting dukkha. Not giving up, but giving in to the truth of your experience. Letting it be seen, letting it be held, letting it be a part of your life without making it the whole story. And when that happens, a different kind of strength rises, one that doesn't need to be seen, one that doesn't need to prove anything, one that comes quietly, through presence, through honesty, through tenderness. This strength is what allows you to live fully, not by avoiding suffering, but by walking with it, knowing it will come, knowing it will pass, and knowing that through it all, you are still here, still breathing, still worthy of love. The moment you stop resisting pain and begin meeting it with tenderness, something opens, not a doorway out of the difficulty, but a soft space within it. You start to see the edges of suffering dissolve. What once felt like a private wound begins to feel less personal, less separate. You sense that your experiences, your struggles, your fears, your longings are not just yours, they are deeply human. They are part of a larger web that holds everyone. And in that recognition, you feel less alone. This is where the truth of interbeing begins to reveal itself. You begin to understand that your existence is not isolated, your pain is not separate, your healing is not independent. Who you are, your identity, your worth, your becoming is deeply woven into everything else. Not metaphorically, literally. Interbeing means that nothing exists by itself. Every part of you arises in relationship. Your thoughts were shaped by language taught to you by others. Your feelings have roots in your experiences with people, places, stories. Even your breath is not yours, alone taken from trees, shared with the sky. The Buddha's teaching of paticca samuppada-dependent origination reveals this truth at the deepest level. Nothing arises without conditions. Everything you are comes from causes, and those causes are never isolated. They stretch far beyond your individual life. When you see this clearly, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. This changes how you see yourself. You are no longer just a solitary self moving through the world. You are a continuation of many things: your ancestors, your environment, the kindness and harm you've received, the wisdom and confusion you've encountered. You are shaped, supported, and held by countless unseen hands. This does not mean you lack individuality. It means your individuality is not cut off. It is interwoven. You are not separate from life. You are an expression of it. Seeing through this lens softens the inner critic, because when you judge yourself, you often forget context. You forget how much of your behavior was formed by what you learned, by what you lacked, by what you feared. You start to blame yourself as if you were fully responsible for everything you feel and do. But Interbeing reminds you, you were shaped, and shaping can change. This understanding brings compassion, not as a feeling you try to generate, but as a natural response to truth. You stop needing to carry the weight of isolation. You stop believing that every struggle is a personal failure. You start recognizing that being affected is not weakness, it's reality. When you hurt, the cause often isn't just within you. It includes conditions you didn't choose. The words you heard growing up, the systems around you, the emotional patterns passed down from generations. When you begin to see all these connections, blame transforms into understanding. Shame softens into awareness. You also begin to recognize that your healing supports more than just you. Every time you respond with patience instead of reactivity, you shift the energy you bring into the lives around you. Every time you forgive yourself, you make it easier for others to do the same. Every time you speak truth with kindness, you help create a culture of safety. Your healing becomes part of the healing of others, not because you try to fix anyone else, but because your presence changes. It becomes more open, more accepting, more whole. And in that wholeness, others feel more free to be themselves too. You start to notice this in simple ways. A gentle word to yourself makes you more patient with others. A moment of silence allows space for connection. A breath taken in awareness becomes a bridge not only to yourself, but to the world around you. Interbeing is not abstract, it is felt in everyday life, in the way your mood shifts after a kind conversation, in the way sunlight on your skin changes your thoughts, in the way a stranger's smile can soften your inner dialogue. You begin to feel how connected everything is, not because you believe it, but because you sense it directly. This perspective also dissolves pride and insecurity. When you achieve something, you know it didn't happen in isolation. Teachers helped you. Friends encouraged you. Strangers created the tools you used. Even your discipline was shaped by others who modeled it. You stop clinging to success as proof of your worth. And when you fall short, you no longer collapse into self-loathing. You understand that pain was not chosen alone. It was influenced, triggered, inherited. This doesn't remove responsibility. It adds context, and context brings wisdom. You begin to live with more humility and more confidence because you are no longer trying to carry the burden of being everything by yourself. You allow help. You offer help. You see others not as separate from you, but as part of your own unfolding. Your identity begins to feel less rigid. You are not just the roles you play, not just the habits you carry, not just the body you live in. You are part of a vast movement of life that expresses itself in infinite ways. And that movement includes joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion, strength and tenderness. Interbeing also teaches you that your value is not based on being self-sufficient. In fact, the idea of total self-sufficiency is an illusion. Everyone is supported. Everyone depends. The shame of needing others begins to dissolve. You stop pretending you have to do everything on your own. You also stop seeing others as threats. Competition loses its grip. You understand that someone else's success does not diminish your worth. Someone else's beauty does not erase your own. Someone else's peace does not mean you are behind. You recognize that each being is moving through their own web of causes and conditions. You stop judging so quickly. You stop assuming so easily. You listen more. You understand more. You care more. And this care is not sentimental. It's grounded in truth. The truth that when one person suffers, the ripple spreads. The truth that when one person heals, the ripple spreads too. You start choosing thoughts and actions that bring healing, not only for yourself, but for the whole. This view also brings deep gratitude. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by things outside your control. The food you eat, the air you breathe, the books that opened your mind, the people who showed you kindness when you needed it most. Gratitude becomes natural, not forced, but obvious. You begin to live more responsibly, not because of guilt, but because of awareness. You see that your choices matter. What you consume, what you say, how you treat yourself, it all echoes. It all touches something beyond you. Even the smallest acts become sacred. Washing a cup, closing a door gently, speaking a kind word. All of it becomes part of the larger whole. You also feel less urgency to become someone. You stop measuring your progress in isolation. You know that being human is not a race, it is a shared experience. And that your worth is not found in separation, but in connection. You begin to live slower, speak softer, breathe deeper. You notice the life around you with more tenderness, the way leaves move, the way people walk, the way your own body feels when you stop to listen. This is what it means to see through the lens of interbeing. You don't have to prove yourself, you just have to participate fully. You don't have to stand apart, you only have to show up with presence. And when you do, everything begins to change, not because life becomes easy, but because life becomes shared. You are no longer alone in your struggle, you are no longer separate in your joy. You belong. You always did. Now, you begin to live like it. When you begin to live with the awareness that you are not separate, that you are deeply connected to others, to the earth, to each breath, it changes how you move through life. You no longer isolate your experience. You no longer believe the story that you must carry everything on your own. This dissolving of separation reveals something powerful. The way you speak to yourself shapes how you exist in the world. It becomes clear that the voice inside, the one that narrates every moment, needs just as much mindfulness as your actions, because that voice is with you always. And it's either tearing you down or helping you stand. The Buddha spoke of samavaka, right speech, as part of the Eightfold Path. Most people hear this and think about how they talk to others. Speak truthfully, be kind, avoid gossip and harm. But what's often forgotten is that the person you speak to the most every single day is yourself, and no one else hears those words as deeply as you do. Your inner voice carries weight, the tone, the rhythm, the intention behind your thoughts. It affects how you feel, how you act, and how you see yourself. If that voice is harsh, critical, or impatient, it creates tension that ripples through your life. But if it's mindful, clear, and compassionate, it becomes a quiet refuge. Not a false cheerleader, but an honest and supportive presence. Right speech inward starts with awareness. Begin to notice the language you use inside. When you make a mistake, what's the first thing you say to yourself? When you feel anxious or uncertain, how do you respond? Do you meet yourself with kindness or with blame? This awareness is not meant to judge you, it's meant to reveal the pattern. The truth is, many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to a loved one. They call themselves names, question their worth, replay regrets with a tone of contempt. And it happens so often that it begins to feel normal. But this inner harshness is not harmless. It becomes a background frequency that shapes your emotional state, your sense of identity, and your relationship with the world. Right speech is not just about using pleasant words. It's about being honest without being cruel. It's about recognizing when your thoughts are exaggerating or generalizing. It's about learning to interrupt that voice when it starts repeating old judgments that no longer serve you. One way to begin transforming your inner speech is to pay attention to accuracy. Often the mind uses absolute language. I always mess things up. No one cares. I'll never change. These phrases are rarely true, but they carry emotional weight. They close you off. They feed hopelessness. Mindful speech replaces absolutes with specifics. That moment was hard. I'm feeling alone right now. I've struggled before, but I've also grown. This shift doesn't erase difficulty, it gives you clarity. Another key is to reduce internal blame. When something goes wrong, the inner voice may immediately assign fault. It's your fault. You should have known better. What's wrong with you? This kind of speech doesn't help you reflect, it traps you in shame. Right speech invites you to ask instead, what led to this? What can I learn? How can I meet this with care? These questions keep you open. They create space for understanding, not self-attack. It's also important to consider the tone of your inner voice. Not just the content, but the energy. Is it cold? Is it frantic? Is it dismissive? Begin to shift the tone to one of warmth, not because everything is fine, but because you deserve to be met with respect, even when things are hard. Mindful inner speech includes silence. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop the spiral of thought. Take a breath. Let go of the urge to narrate or analyze. Let quiet be the response. This pause can interrupt habits of reactivity and create space for a deeper truth to emerge. Right speech inward is also about encouragement, not empty praise, but genuine support. You're trying. This matters. It's okay to feel this. You don't have to do it all right now. These phrases don't inflate the ego, they soothe the nervous system. They remind you that effort is enough, that presence is progress. One of the most powerful tools for changing inner speech is self-compassion. This doesn't mean excusing every behavior or avoiding responsibility. It means acknowledging pain without doubling it through judgment. When you make a mistake, you can still be accountable without being cruel. When you feel overwhelmed, you can allow the feeling without calling yourself weak. The quality of your inner dialogue also shapes how you relate to others. If your own mind is a place of harshness, it's hard to extend real compassion outward. You may react with irritation, defensiveness, or distancement because you don't care, but because you're carrying too much inner tension. But when your inner voice becomes more spacious, your outer actions follow. You become more patient, more honest, more grounded. Transforming your self-talk is a practice. It won't change overnight. The old patterns may be strong, especially if they were formed early in life. But with awareness, you can begin to interrupt them. You can choose a different voice, one that doesn't distort or flatter, but simply tells the truth with care. This transformation doesn't mean eliminating all negative thoughts. It means not believing them so quickly. It means responding to them with wisdom rather than reaction. You can acknowledge fear without letting it define you. You can feel sadness without creating a story of failure around it. You can notice doubt without surrendering to it. Language matters because it builds your internal environment. Just as the words you speak to others affect relationships, the words you speak to yourself affect your relationship with your own life. When those words are rooted in right speech, they become a foundation for inner safety. You can begin small. Replace one unkind phrase with a neutral one. Soften one judgment. Pause before finishing a sentence in your mind that you know leads nowhere helpful. Over time, these small shifts create a new pattern known where your inner world becomes a place you can trust. When the voice inside is aligned with right speech, it doesn't mean you avoid truth. It means you speak truth with integrity. You say what is real, but you say it with care. You say it with the intention to support, not to punish. You say it because you want to live in harmony with yourself. Right speech inward is not a luxury. It is essential. It is how you learn to stay with yourself through difficulty, how you repair the damage caused by years of inner criticism, how you create a new language, one that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. This new language doesn't have to be poetic. It only has to be sincere. It doesn't have to sound impressive. It only has to be honest. It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be kind. As you continue on the path of self-awareness and compassion, the voice inside will change. It will become quieter when needed. It will become stronger when necessary. And most importantly, it will become a friend. Not because you forced it, but because you showed it what love sounds like. As your inner voice becomes more honest and kind, something profound begins to happen. You stop carrying the burden of perfection. You no longer speak to yourself like someone you're trying to fix. You start treating your inner world as a living space knot, a battlefield. And in that space, you begin to see something quietly powerful. You are always changing, not just in small ways, but in every breath. And what you are today is not what you were yesterday. What you feel now is not what you'll feel forever. This truth doesn't have to be frightening. In fact, it might be the very thing that frees you. The Buddha called it anicathe, principle of impermanence. It is the understanding that everything in life, without exception, is in motion. This includes your thoughts, your feelings, your body, your beliefs, and even your identity. Nothing stays the same. And this is not a flaw in existence. It is the essence of it. When you begin to relate to yourself through this lens, you realize that much of your suffering has come from treating what is temporary as permanent. You believed that a bad moment defined a bad life. That one mistake meant you were incapable, that an old version of yourself was still in control. But none of that holds up when you truly see impermanence, because what you see is movement. What you see is growth. This realization brings relief. You don't have to carry the weight of who you used to be. You don't have to be ashamed of choices you made when you didn't know better. You don't have to keep proving you've changed. The truth is, you're not even the same person you were a few months ago. Your cells have shifted. Your thoughts have evolved. Your insight has deepened. You are a continuous unfolding, not a fixed statue. This doesn't mean your past is erased. It means your relationship to it can soften. You can forgive the past, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines the whole of you. You understand that your former self was doing the best it could with the tools it had. And now, with new tools, you are capable of new choices. That's not hypocrisy. That's growth. Impermanence teaches you to stop clinging to identities, to habits, to labels, even the ones that once gave you comfort, especially those. Because the longer you hold on to something that no longer reflects your truth, the more you suffer. Letting go doesn't mean rejecting your past. It means recognizing that the past is not where you live anymore. You also begin to appreciate your present self in a new way. You understand that who you are now is a unique passing configuration. The way your mind works, the way your heart opens, the way you understand the world. This version of you is only here for a little while, not in a dramatic sense, but in a real one. The things you struggle with today may no longer affect you in a year. The things you love today may fade or deepen in ways you can't yet predict. This gives you reason to pay attention, to savor, to honor the fleeting nature of this particular moment in your life. When you resist change, you suffer. You try to hold on to a sense of self that no longer fits. You become confused when your goals shift or your values evolve. But when you embrace impermanence, you give yourself permission to adapt, to move in new directions, to grow without apology. You stop asking, "Why am I not who I used to be?" and start asking, "What is this moment asking of me now?" This shift brings gentleness. You stop forcing yourself to stay consistent with past versions of yourself that were never meant to last forever. You begin to live more honestly, allowing your truth to change as you change. Impermanence also helps you soften your expectations. You stop demanding that joy lasts forever. You stop fearing the end of ease. You understand that all things arise and pass. And this does not create indifference, it creates appreciation. You begin to love people more deeply because you know you won't have them forever. You begin to cherish moments more fully because you know they are passing. You begin to accept difficulty more easily because you know it too will fade. This perspective does not make you detached, it makes you awake. It also teaches you resilience. When you are in pain, you remember it won't last. When you are confused, you remember clarity will return. When you feel lost, you remember you have changed before and you will change again. This gives you strength, not the kind that resists life, but the kind that flows with it. Impermanence also helps you release regret. You stop clinging to what could have been. You stop rewriting the past. You stop punishing yourself for who you were. You understand that everything moves forward, and you can too. You forgive yourself because you no longer expect yourself to have known what only time could teach. You start making peace with your evolution. You let the parts of yourself that are ready to fade, fade. You let the new parts emerge without needing to explain them. You stop asking for permission to grow. You also stop trying to define yourself in rigid terms. You no longer need a label for every feeling. You don't need to fit a perfect mold. You allow yourself to be complex, to shift, to contradict yourself without shame. This doesn't mean you lack integrity. It means you have allowed yourself to be alive. You begin to understand that everything in life, including love, creativity, identity, and even your pain, is a process. It has its own rhythm. It moves through you. When you stop gripping, you stop interrupting that process. You allow change to happen with less resistance. Even healing is seen differently through impermanence. It's no longer a destination. It's a practice of meeting yourself as you are, knowing that who you are will keep changing. You stop waiting for the final version of you. You stop believing in an end point where everything is solved. Instead, you keep showing up with curiosity, with kindness, with the willingness to keep evolving. And as you live this way, you begin to feel lighter. You carry less shame. You judge yourself less harshly. You don't need to make every moment perfect because you understand that nothing stays. This doesn't lead to carelessness. It leads to sincerity. You stop wasting time trying to be someone you're not. You begin to live with honesty because you know it's the only way to be free. Impermanence, when truly understood, becomes a kind of love. A love that honors the present, forgives the past, and makes space for what's next. You no longer need to cling to the person you once were. You no longer need to hold your identity together with tension. You no longer believe that you must stay the same to be worthy. You are changing. You always have been. And that's not the problem. That's the beauty. Loving yourself means loving this movement, this rhythm, this breath-by-breath unfolding of who you are, not with fear, but with respect, not with control, but with trust. You are not meant to stay the same. You are meant to grow, to shift, to learn, to rise. And every version of you, past and present, deserves to be held with that same tenderness, because they were all doing their part in getting you here. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are unfolding. And every breath you take is a chance to love yourself exactly as you are, knowing that even this will change, and that is what makes it sacred. When you begin to embrace change as the nature of life, when you stop fearing the flow of who you are becoming, something else softens inside you. The grip of judgment loosens. The old need to punish yourself for past mistakes begins to fade. But even as you grow more forgiving, there may still be one place that resists healing, the space where self-hatred hides. It doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it appears in the silence after you've tried your best. Sometimes it waits at the edge of your victories, whispering that you're still not enough. And this is where another form of practice becomes essential, a practice that doesn't just help you survive that pain, but gently teaches you how to love through it. This is the heart of Tonglen, a Tibetan meditation practice that works directly with suffering, not by avoiding it, but by breathing it in. While many traditions encourage pushing pain away, Tonglen invites you to meet it fully, to receive it, to hold it, and then to send back love. At first, this idea may sound strange. We are often taught to avoid what hurts, to protect ourselves from discomfort, but Tonglen moves in the opposite direction. It teaches you that the doorway to healing is not resistance, but intimacy, and that even the darkest emotions carry the seed of compassion when they are touched with presence. The practice begins simply. You sit with your breath and allow your attention to settle. You gently bring to mind a part of yourself that feels heavy, closed, or full of pain. This could be a moment of shame, a memory of failure, or a place inside that still holds anger, fear, or grief. You don't try to change it. You don't push it away. You let it be exactly as it is. Then, as you breathe in, you imagine taking in that suffering, not to absorb it in a harmful way, but to stop running from it. You breathe it in with the wish to bring understanding. With each in-breath, you acknowledge the pain. With each out-breath, you send relief. You exhale softness. You exhale care. You exhale whatever your heart longs to feel: forgiveness, lightness, hope. This exchange reverses the usual pattern. Instead of turning away from pain, you meet it. Instead of closing your heart, you open it. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. You realize that you are capable of holding much more than you thought, not through force, but through compassion. This practice is not about fixing your suffering. It's about transforming your relationship with it. When you breathe in the heaviness of your own heart and breathe out warmth, something begins to shift. That shift is subtle but profound. You stop treating your pain as something wrong. You begin to understand it as something sacred, something that deserves love, not rejection. Once you've practiced with your own pain, you can begin to extend the circle outward. You think of someone else who is struggling, not someone far removed, but someone real, someone whose pain touches you. You breathe in their suffering. You don't try to rescue them. You don't imagine yourself superior. You simply feel with them. You let your own heart become a place that knows how to hold suffering. Then you breathe out. You send them ease. You send them comfort. You offer them the same compassion you've learned to give yourself. Over time, this practice reshapes how you see the world. You become less afraid of what's difficult within you and around you. You stop turning away from people who are hurting. You stop judging others for showing their wounds. Because you now understand that their pain is not separate from yours. You see the shared thread of being human, and through that seeing, isolation dissolves. Tonglen breaks the cycle of emotional avoidance. It teaches you that you don't need to feel perfect in order to offer love. You don't need to fix your feelings before you can hold them. You don't need to be free of pain before you become a source of comfort. This helps you confront self-hatred in a new way. Instead of believing the stories it tells you, you begin to witness the pain beneath it. You see that self-hatred is often a reaction to wounds that have not been held with care. It grows where there has been misunderstanding, where softness was missing, where needs were ignored. When you meet this hatred with breath and compassion, it starts to lose its edge, not because it vanishes, but because it is no longer reinforced. Each time you breathe in that old pain and breathe out kindness, you create a new imprint in your heart, an imprint of inclusion, an imprint of care. This does not mean condoning harmful behavior. It means understanding it. When you apply Tonglen inwardly, you don't justify your past mistakes, but you stop letting them define your worth. You see that even harmful actions were rooted in confusion, fear, or pain. You meet that truth with responsibility, but also with empathy. Tonglen also trains you to stop making discomfort personal. The tightness you feel, the grief, the anxiety, it is yours, but it is also shared. Millions of others feel it too. When you breathe it in, you breathe in for them as well. When you breathe out, you send relief not only to yourself, but to every being who feels just like you. This widens your perspective. It connects you to something larger. It reminds you that healing is not just about self-improvement, it's about dissolving the barriers between your suffering and the suffering of others. This connection is not abstract. You begin to feel it in daily life. You feel more patient with people who are overwhelmed. You feel less need to defend yourself when others are reactive. You feel less shame about your own emotions, because you know the deeper truth. This is what it means to be human. In practicing Tonglen, you learn to become a vessel, not a container for pain, but a channel for transformation. You let the breath carry you. You let the heart open. You trust that meeting suffering with compassion will always bring more healing than avoiding it with fear. The beauty of this practice is its simplicity. It doesn't require special tools or perfect conditions. It asks only that you be present, that you breathe, that you be willing to meet what is difficult with care. You can use this practice at any moment. When anxiety rises, breathe it in gently and breathe out peace. When old shame returns, breathe it in without resistance and breathe out forgiveness. When someone hurts you, breathe in their pain too, not to take it on, but to soften your own heart. To break the cycle of pain with compassion. This is not a technique for perfect people. It is for those willing to stay open in the middle of what hurts. It is for those tired of running from themselves. It is for those ready to see that even the darkest feeling can be met with love. Through Tonglen, self-hatred becomes the very path to compassion, because when you stop pushing pain away, you discover your ability to care. Not as an idea, but as a lived truth. A truth that breathes. A truth that heals. A truth that does not need to be earned. The transformation is not dramatic. It is steady, quiet, real. And in that quiet, a different kind of strength is born. One that doesn't come from fighting pain, but from embracing it with a heart that no longer turns away. As you practice meeting pain with breath and compassion, the way you relate to yourself begins to shift in more subtle places. You no longer run from discomfort. You don't believe harsh stories so quickly. You begin to see suffering not as something to reject, but as something to hold. But even with all this care, there may be one relationship that still feels fractured, the one with your own body. Long after the mind starts to soften, the body can remain a source of shame, frustration, or silence. And that silence is often where the deepest disconnection hides. This disconnection does not begin with you. It is built by messages passed down over years. Messages that your body must meet certain standards to be lovable, that it must look a certain way to deserve rest, that it must function without flaw to be respected. These ideas do not come from truth. They come from conditioning, comparison, and culture. And they lead to forgetting the most important thing. Your body is not a problem. It is a sacred ground for awakening. In Buddhist practice, the body is not seen as separate from the path. It is the place where you experience awareness. It is where you feel presence. It is where you meet the breath, where you sit in stillness, where you walk with mindfulness. Every step, every breath, every sensation is part of the practice. See not in spite of the body, but through it. This understanding changes everything. When you begin to see your body not as an obstacle but as a gateway, you stop trying to overcome it. You stop treating it as a project to fix. You start listening to it as a teacher. Its aches, its needs, its rhythms. They are not distractions. They are invitations to return to presence. Body positivity, from the perspective of the Dharma, is not about forcing yourself to feel beautiful all the time. It is not about reaching a place of constant body confidence. It is about seeing clearly. It is about ending the war. It is about treating your body with the same kindness and truthfulness that you practice with your thoughts. Right view applies here too. The belief that you are your appearance is a misunderstanding. The belief that your worth depends on shape, size, or ability is not aligned with truth. When you see this, not just intellectually but experientially, the grip of judgment begins to loosen. You begin to ask new questions. Not, how do I look? But, how do I feel? Not, am I acceptable? But, am I listening? You begin to respond to your body's messages, not as inconveniences, but as sacred cues. When your body is tired, you let it rest. When it is hungry, you feed it without punishment. When it is in pain, you offer care. This is not indulgence. This is presence. Loving your body does not mean denying its changes or pretending you don't have preferences. It means acknowledging all that it carries and choosing to honor it anyway. This body has held grief, joy, illness, fear, delight, trauma, and recovery. It has moved you through every single moment of your life, and it is still here. To bring mindfulness to the body is to bring reverence to your experience. Every sensation is a doorway. The feeling of your feet on the ground, the rising and falling of your chest, the tension in your shoulders, each of these moments brings you back to now. This is why the Buddha began with the body. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the first foundation is Kayanupassana, mindfulness of the body. Because without connection to the body, practice cannot be grounded. Without inhabiting your body, awareness floats, disconnected from direct experience. The body becomes a place where truth can be known, where impermanence is felt, where compassion is cultivated. This is not metaphor, this is practice. When you turn toward your body with mindfulness, you begin to notice how much you've ignored or resisted it. You see how often you've tried to control it through discipline or neglect. You see how often you've looked at it through eyes of comparison rather than care. And with that awareness, you can choose differently. You can bring your attention to your skin with kindness. You can breathe into your belly with respect. You can place your hand over your heart, not to fix it, but to say, I'm here. This relationship builds over time. It grows slowly, through repeated moments of returning. You stop treating your body like a machine. You stop demanding silence from your symptoms. You begin to see that your body has been speaking all along. You just needed to listen without judgment. This listening includes honoring the ways your body is different from others. There is no single form that defines worth, no ideal that determines value. Your body, just as it is right now, contains the full capacity for awakening. You can sit in meditation with pain and meet it with breath. You can walk slowly, feeling each step connect you to the ground. You can eat mindfully, sensing how nourishment supports presence. You can lie down in rest and feel the body soften into trust. All of this is practice. All of this is sacred. There is also room for grief. Grief for the years you spent fighting your body. Grief for the shame that was placed on you by others. Grief for the parts of yourself you learned to hide. This grief is not weakness, it is part of healing. You don't have to rush to acceptance. You only need to begin. To stop speaking about your body as an enemy. To stop waiting until it changes, to offer it love. To begin seeing it not through the eyes of control, but through the lens of presence. The body is the first home you ever had. It is also the one you will carry with you until the end of this life. It makes sense to treat it with care, to return to it with reverence. To remember that this body is not just yours, it is made of earth, water, heat, and breath. It is nature wearing your name. This perspective dissolves the shame placed on bodies that don't meet social standards. You begin to see how absurd it is to measure worth by appearance when the body is so clearly a sacred container for life itself. You also begin to honor what your body can do, not in terms of achievement, but in terms of support. It allows you to touch, to speak, to connect, to move, to rest, to feel. Even when it is in pain, it is still functioning as your bridge to the world. You can begin to thank it for that, not out of guilt, but out of love. Loving your body through Dharma is not a destination. It is a practice of remembering again and again. Every time you get caught in comparison, you return to breath. Every time you feel shame, you return to presence. Every time you forget that your body is sacred, you come back to the simple truth that this body is not a mistake. It is the ground for awakening. You don't have to feel radiant every day. You don't have to reject moments of discomfort, but you can choose not to abandon yourself. You can choose to meet your body with the same patience and compassion you offer to your heart and your mind. Because your body is not separate, it is not other, it is not less than, it is the path. And each time you remember that, healing deepens, respect returns, and love becomes not something you wait for, but something you practice through every breath, every movement, every moment of gentle return. The more you return to your body with reverence, the more you discover a steadiness that has always been available but often overlooked. You realize that presence lives not only in thoughts or beliefs, but in sensation, breath, and rhythm. And with that growing connection, you begin to move through the world with more care. But even with this groundedness, life still brings waves. Emotions rise, chaos visits, stress builds. Some days, everything feels too much. And this is where a deeper kind of strength is needed, one that doesn't fight the storm, but stands calmly within it. This is the quiet power of upekkha, often translated as equanimity. It is the inner balance that remains steady even when the outer world spins. It is not indifference, it is not emotional numbness. It is a presence that stays centered even in the face of intensity. Equanimity is the antidote to inner chaos, not because it erases emotion, but because it holds it without collapse. It teaches you how to feel without drowning, how to observe without reacting, how to remain open without being overwhelmed. This balance becomes essential in a life that is constantly shifting. Emotions are not a problem. They are part of the human experience. But without equanimity, they can become destabilizing. Joy turns into attachment. Fear becomes paralysis. Anger becomes harm. Sadness becomes identity. Equanimity doesn't get rid of these feelings, it changes how you relate to them. When you develop equanimity, you begin to notice the space between stimulus and response. You feel anger rising, but you don't immediately act. You sense sadness, but you don't fall into despair. You notice joy, but you don't cling to it in fear of losing it. This gap, the space to witness before reacting, is where your freedom grows. Equanimity helps you step out of emotional extremes. It holds your experience with evenness. You are no longer pulled so far in one direction that you lose sight of your center. You begin to trust that what rises will also pass, and you learn to stay steady in the middle. This steadiness is not hard or cold. It's warm, grounded, and accepting. It allows you to be fully human while remaining clear. You cry without shame. You feel deeply without apology. But you don't let your emotions define you. You become the space in which they unfold, not the emotion itself. This shift is subtle but transformative. You stop being ruled by inner weather. You stop chasing only what feels good and resisting what feels bad. You begin to live with more consistency, not because you don't feel, but because you are no longer thrown off course by what you feel. Developing equanimity requires attention. It is not something you force. It grows through practice, through mindfulness, through patience, through seeing things clearly. When you are caught in a strong emotion, you pause, you breathe, you name it without judgment. You remind yourself that this moment is not forever, that this feeling is not your identity, that you have room to hold this. Over time, the nervous system begins to settle. Your body learns that not every wave needs to be reacted to. Your mind learns that not every thought is urgent. Your heart learns that calm is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to stay open to all of it. Equanimity also transforms self-love, because on days when everything feels messy, when you're anxious, angry, exhausted, or afraid, it becomes the part of you that says, Even this belongs. You stop needing to feel peaceful in order to be kind to yourself. You stop waiting for calm to offer care. You begin to love yourself in the middle of the storm. This kind of love is rare. It doesn't depend on conditions. It doesn't wait for perfection. It shows up again and again, because that's what real love does. Equanimity also allows you to be more present with others. You stop absorbing their chaos. You stop needing to fix or control. You become a steady presence, one that listens without getting pulled into every emotional tide. This makes your relationships clearer, more compassionate, less reactive. You also begin to let go of needing everything to go your way. Equanimity helps you accept what you cannot change, not because you've given up, but because you've stopped fighting life. You see that peace doesn't come from controlling outcomes, comes from meeting each outcome with clarity and balance. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you wise. You still act, you still care. But you don't collapse when things don't go as planned. You trust that you can meet life as it is, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. This capacity grows with experience. Each time you stay with a difficult emotion without reacting, you build strength. Each time you sit in discomfort without distraction, you expand your capacity. Each time you choose stillness over urgency, your balance deepens. You begin to appreciate silence. Stillness becomes a source of nourishment, not a void to escape. You find peace in the simple act of breathing, of sitting, of being. Equanimity teaches you that you don't have to chase anything to be okay. That stability can be found in this moment, as it is. When life becomes chaotic, when everything feels out of control, equanimity becomes your anchor. Not because it makes the chaos disappear, but because it gives you a place to stand. You learn to be the eye of the storm. Steady, present, awake. This steadiness does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop identifying so deeply with every feeling. You become spacious, you become clear, you become trustworthy to yourself and to others. Equanimity is not cold detachment, it is deep inclusion. It says, I can hold all of this without losing myself. And in that holding, something beautiful happens. Your suffering becomes less sharp. Your joy becomes less fragile. Your love becomes more unconditional. You begin to see that peace is not found by avoiding life's intensity. It is found by learning how to stay steady within it. This is what it means to love yourself when you're overwhelmed, not by fixing your emotions, but by holding them with balance, not by controlling every response, but by pausing long enough to choose a wiser one. With equanimity, your heart becomes a place that can hold anything, and in that space, your life begins to unfold with more grace, more clarity, and more depth than ever before. As equanimity deepens, a new kind of maturity takes root. You no longer react to every rise and fall within you. You respond with steadiness, not from control but from care. You understand that your experiences are not permanent and your emotions are not your identity. You begin to walk through life with more grace, not because things have become easier, but because you have become more grounded. And from this groundedness comes the courage to face what many spend their lives avoiding. There are truths in this human life that are not soft. They are not meant to be feared, but they are often left unspoken. These are the truths of change, loss, aging, and mortality. The Buddha named them clearly in what are called the 5 remembrances. They are not meant to scare you or bring despair. They are offered as tools to wake you up, to remind you that your life is sacred not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. The 5 remembrances are: I am of the nature to grow old. I am of the nature to become ill. I am of the nature to die. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. My actions are my only true belongings. At first glance, these may feel heavy. They point to things we often try to avoid, but when you allow them into your awareness, they become anchors. Not anchors that weigh you down, but ones that hold you steady in the reality of life. To remember that you are of the nature to age is to release the impossible pressure to always be youthful. It helps you see that change in your body is not a failure. It is part of your belonging to this human experience. When you accept aging not as decline, but as a process of deepening, you begin to treat your body with more respect. You no longer cling to a frozen image of who you think you should be. You begin to care for your body because it carries you through time, not because it fits an ideal. You also stop comparing yourself to younger versions of you. You see your growth. You recognize the wisdom that has come through experience. You allow yourself to age not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You welcome the signs of your life having been lived. To remember that you are of the nature to become ill is not to invite sickness, but to stop pretending you are immune to it. It brings you into deeper compassion for your body, especially in times of difficulty. It helps you care for yourself, not just when things are easy, but especially when you feel vulnerable. You begin to listen more closely. You honor your energy. You respect your limits. You soften toward yourself instead of blaming your body when it doesn't meet certain expectations. Illness, when met with mindfulness, becomes a teacher. It slows you down. It calls you inward. It asks you to care more deeply. It reminds you that strength is not always about productivity, it's about presence. To remember that you are of the nature to die is not morbid. It is clarifying. It strips away what does not matter. It sharpens your priorities. It brings you back to now. When you understand that life is finite, you begin to live more fully. You say what needs to be said. You listen with more presence. You stop waiting for the perfect time to love, to rest, to speak, to begin. Contemplating death does not steal joy. It magnifies it, because when you know something won't last, you stop taking it for granted. You begin to cherish the smallest details, the feel of sunlight, the sound of laughter, the quiet of your breath. You also begin to release resentment faster. You understand that time is too precious to waste on holding grudges or postponing peace. To remember that all who are dear to you and everything you love are of the nature to change is to soften your grip. It teaches you that love is not ownership. That connection is not about control. You begin to love more freely, with open hands and an open heart. You stop trying to make people stay the same. You allow relationships to evolve. You become more present in your connections, knowing that each interaction could be the last in its current form. This remembrance also brings reverence to the people in your life. You see their impermanence, and instead of fearing it, you let it deepen your appreciation. You pause more often. You forgive more easily. You express gratitude while you can. The final remembrance is that your actions are your only true belongings, not your achievements, your status, your image, or your possessions, but how you live, how you speak, how you show up when no one is watching. This truth centers you. It calls you back to integrity. It reminds you that the energy you bring into the world is what remains when everything else fades. This remembrance does not pressure you to be perfect. It reminds you to be intentional. It encourages you to live in a way that you won't regret, to make your choices count, to use your words wisely, to treat others and yourself with respect. Together, these 5 truths create a foundation for deep self-respect, not a surface-level self-esteem, but a profound honoring of your life. When you remember that you will grow old, become ill, and die, you stop wasting time trying to be invincible. You start being real. You live more honestly. You treat your time like it matters. This doesn't mean you become rigid or somber. In fact, it opens you to joy. Joy that is rooted not in denial but in clarity. You begin to celebrate simply being alive. You stop needing everything to be extraordinary. You begin to find meaning in presence itself. You also become more courageous. When you are no longer afraid of truth, you start living more fully in it. You take risks that align with your heart. You speak from depth rather than from fear. You make peace with endings because you understand they are part of every beginning. Self-respect grows here, in this willingness to face what is real, to honor life not because it is perfect, but because it is fleeting. You begin to hold yourself with dignity, not because you have avoided pain, but because you have not run from it. This kind of awareness shapes your decisions. You begin to ask, is this how I want to spend my time? Is this aligned with what matters? Am I living in a way that reflects my values? These questions are not burdens, they are gifts. They give you a compass. They bring you back to what is essential. The 5 remembrances are not meant to create anxiety. They are meant to dissolve illusion. They help you wake up. They help you stay grounded in what is real. And in that groundedness, you find a quiet strength, a deep peace, a steady sense of worth that does not depend on external success. You are not here forever. But while you are here, you can live with depth. You can choose love over fear, presence over distraction, integrity over performance. You can choose to honor your life by living it fully, and that choice begins with remembering, not once, but again and again, in small moments, in deep breaths, in pauses between rushing. These remembrances become part of your inner landscape. They help you face difficulty with openness. They help you meet endings with gratitude. They help you walk through life with your eyes wide open and your heart more alive than ever. As the 5 remembrances settle into your awareness, a deeper reverence for life begins to grow. You realize your time here is brief, your body ever-changing, your connections fragile yet meaningful. You begin to move through the world with more purpose, more softness, more truth. But even with this clarity, a new question often arises. How do I care for myself in a world that pulls me in opposite directions? When does self-love become overindulgence? When does discipline become self-denial? How do I walk a path that honors my needs without losing balance? This is where the wisdom of the middle way becomes essential. The Buddha taught the middle way as the path between extremes, between harsh austerity and excessive pleasure. But this teaching is not limited to spiritual discipline. It applies to how you care for yourself each day. It is the art of giving yourself enough without falling into excess. It is the practice of treating yourself with kindness without slipping into avoidance. And it is how true self-love becomes sustainable. Loving yourself wisely means being honest about what you need, not just what you want in the moment. Sometimes, what feels good now may lead to harm later. Other times, what feels uncomfortable now may bring healing. The middle way asks you to hold both perspectives. It asks you to look deeper than impulse, to find the care that brings long-term nourishment rather than short-term escape. This begins with attention. You start to notice your patterns. When are you reaching for distraction instead of rest? When are you pushing yourself too hard under the name of productivity? When are you avoiding difficult emotions by numbing instead of feeling? These are not questions meant to shame. They are invitations to become more intimate with your own experience. You start asking yourself not just, what do I feel like doing, but what will truly support me right now? Sometimes the answer is movement. Other times it's stillness. Sometimes it's saying no to another demand. Other times it's showing up even when it's hard. The middle way teaches you to listen, to discern, to respond with wisdom instead of reaction. Self-love without balance can lead to neglect. You may stop challenging yourself. You may justify harmful habits. You may confuse avoidance with peace. But on the other side, self-love without softness can turn into punishment. You may set impossible standards. You may speak to yourself with criticism instead of care. You may push past your limits, believing rest is weakness. The middle way is not about being neutral or indifferent. It is about staying connected to reality. It is about knowing when to pause and when to act, when to comfort and when to challenge, when to let go and when to hold steady. It requires humility because it asks you to drop rigid identities like always being the achiever or always being the healer and instead be honest about what is needed in each moment. One of the ways to practice this is by observing your inner dialogue. Is your self-care coming from a place of kindness or from fear? Are you treating yourself like a project to fix or a person to care for? Are you using routines as a way to support yourself or as a way to control everything? These questions help you see if your actions are aligned with wisdom or reaction. Balanced self-love also requires boundaries. Saying no is not neglect. It is a form of respect. Saying yes to your needs is not selfish. It is how you build resilience. But balance means you also consider the impact of your actions. You ask how your care affects others, how it shapes your life, and whether it is rooted in clarity or compulsion. This middle path includes structure and fluidity. It means you may have routines, but you're not rigid. You're willing to adjust when needed. You're not attached to being perfect in your practice. You understand that rest and discipline are not opposites. They are both forms of care when used with intention. The middle way helps you navigate moments of uncertainty. When you don't know what to do, it offers space to pause and feel into the next right step. You don't have to rush. You don't have to have all the answers. You simply return to what is true in this moment. What would be the most loving action right now? Not the easiest, not the hardest, but the most true. This approach also allows for joy without guilt. You don't shame yourself for enjoying life. You don't believe you must suffer to grow. You learn to trust your pleasure when it is rooted in presence, not in escape. You stop dividing your life into what's spiritual and what's indulgent. You begin to see that everything, eating, resting, working, playing, can be sacred when done with awareness. You stop measuring self-love by how much you do or how little you need. Instead, you measure it by how connected you feel to yourself. Are you listening? Are you responding with care? Are you honoring your truth even when it's inconvenient? The middle way also helps you stay resilient in the face of change. Life is unpredictable, needs shift, circumstances evolve. Balance is not a fixed position, it is a dynamic state. Like walking a tightrope, you are always adjusting. The goal is not to freeze in perfect posture, but to keep moving with awareness. This path requires gentleness. You will not always get it right. Some days you may lean too far into comfort. Other days you may push too hard. The practice is not about perfect balance. It's about returning again and again with honesty and compassion. You begin to trust yourself more deeply, not because you always feel confident, but because you have learned how to listen. You've learned how to stay with yourself, even when things are messy. You've learned how to offer both comfort and structure, both stillness and motion. In this way, the middle way becomes not just a practice, but a relationship with yourself that is based on respect, not rules, on care, not control, on presence, not performance. And this relationship grows stronger each time you choose balance over extremes, each time you choose to pause before reacting, each time you choose to meet yourself not with judgment, but with wisdom. Loving yourself in this way doesn't always feel dramatic. It may look like choosing sleep instead of scrolling, like walking away from a habit that no longer serves you, like showing up to a commitment because it matters, even when it's hard, like taking a break because your body is asking. These small acts of balance create a life that is stable, kind, and whole. The middle way invites you to live in alignment not just with ideals, but with reality, with the truth of your changing needs, with the truth of your imperfect humanity, with the truth of your deep capacity for both discipline and tenderness. This is how you learn to love yourself, not by swinging between extremes, but by walking the steady, honest, and compassionate path that honors the complexity of your being. Step by step, choice by choice, presence by presence. As you walk the middle way, neither forcing nor avoiding, neither denying nor indulging, you begin to see yourself with more clarity. You hold space for both strength and softness. You learn to care without clinging, to rest without guilt, and to act with integrity instead of impulse. But even as balance begins to shape your choices, there may still be something that lingers quietly beneath it all: the weight of your past, the moments you wish you could take back, the versions of yourself you now see differently, the harm you may have caused when you were unaware, afraid, or in pain. And here, the practice of self-love meets one of its greatest challenges: the work of forgiveness. Forgiving yourself is not about forgetting. It's not about erasing history or pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness is the process of releasing your identity from being frozen in your worst moments. It is the choice to stop punishing yourself endlessly for who you were when you didn't yet know what you know now. And this is where the Buddhist understanding of karma offers a vital shift in perspective. Karma is often misunderstood. It is not a cosmic punishment system. It is not fate. It is not a verdict passed down by the universe. In its truest form, karma means action. It is the natural law of cause and effect. Every action creates a ripple. Every choice leaves an imprint. But karma is not fixed. It is fluid. It moves with you, and it changes as you change. This understanding matters deeply when it comes to self-forgiveness. If karma were permanent, you would be stuck. There would be no room to grow, no way to repair, no chance to heal. But karma responds to what you do now. It does not freeze you in place. It gives you a way forward. It allows transformation not through denial, but through intentional action. Forgiving yourself through the lens of karma means recognizing that while past actions have consequences, they do not define your future. It means acknowledging the harm you may have caused, but also choosing to meet that recognition with responsibility rather than shame. Shame keeps you stuck. Responsibility opens the door to redemption. When you see that karma responds to present action, you realize that every moment is a turning point. What you do now matters more than what you did then, because now you can choose with awareness. Now you can act with compassion. Now you can plant different seeds. This doesn't undo the past, but it changes how you carry it. It shifts your focus from guilt to growth. You begin to ask, what can I learn? What can I offer? How can I live differently now to honor the truth I have discovered? Self-forgiveness is an act of love grounded in clarity. It is not about making excuses. It is about refusing to keep your heart in chains. It is the recognition that you cannot heal through self-punishment. Healing comes through presence, through care, and through the choice to live with intention from this point forward. Understanding karma in this way also helps you stop identifying with your mistakes. You are not your past actions. You are the awareness that sees them. You are the one who is growing, the one who is choosing differently, the one who is willing to change. This shift is powerful because it gives you back your agency. It says, you are not broken. You are responsible. And being responsible is not a burden, it is a gift. The process of self-forgiveness begins with honesty. You acknowledge the impact of your actions. You don't minimize or deflect. You see the harm clearly, but you meet that clarity with compassion. You understand that the self who caused harm was shaped by conditions, by ignorance, fear, trauma, pain. And you also understand that the self who sees that truth now is capable of doing better. This dual awareness of past harm and present wisdom is what makes forgiveness possible. Without awareness, change cannot happen. Without compassion, healing cannot unfold. But when the two come together, karma begins to move differently. The energy you put into the world starts to reflect your growth rather than your pain. You also begin to act differently, not to erase the past, but to transform your relationship with it. You offer apologies where possible. You show up more fully. You stop repeating the same cycles. You build trust with yourself by living in alignment with your values. These actions, over time, begin to soften the weight of your regrets. Forgiveness is not a switch, it is a path. Some days it feels easy, other days old guilt resurfaces. That is part of the process. What matters is that you keep walking, that you keep choosing compassion, that you keep remembering that karma is dynamic. Every kind word, every honest action, every loving choice rewrites the path ahead. This understanding also helps you see others more clearly. When you know that karma is fluid, you stop reducing people to their worst moments. You stop holding others in fixed judgments. You begin to allow the possibility that they too can grow, just as you have. This softens your relationships. It brings more empathy into your world. And it strengthens your ability to offer forgiveness, not just inwardly, but outwardly. Through this lens, your journey becomes one of alignment. You live in a way that reflects who you are becoming, not who you were. You stop defining yourself by old stories. You start writing new ones, not to cover the past, but to honor the truth you've found through it. The freedom that comes with self-forgiveness is not light or superficial. It is deep, it is grounded. It comes from knowing that your past shaped you, but it does not have to confine you. It comes from realizing that what you do next is what matters most. You stop running from what happened. You stop hiding. You begin to carry your story with integrity. You share it where it can help. You learn from it where it can teach. And you offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a friend. Forgiving yourself also means honoring your humanity. It means recognizing that mistakes are part of being alive. That imperfection is not a flaw in your design, but part of your path. You stop holding yourself to impossible standards. You begin to offer kindness without needing to earn it. This shift creates space. Space for new action. Space for deeper love. Space for a future that is not a reflection of your past, but a reflection of your presence. You learn to sit with yourself again, not as someone to correct, but as someone to care for. You become less afraid of what you've done because you've learned how to meet it with truth. You become more willing to keep showing up for your life because you trust that your presence matters. In this way, karma becomes not a burden, but a path of redemption. It reminds you that nothing is set in stone, that your actions carry weight, but so does your awareness. That healing is not found in guilt, but in conscious, loving choice. Self-forgiveness is how you reclaim your voice, how you rebuild trust with yourself, how you allow love to reach places in you that have long been abandoned. And in every breath, every choice, every step forward, you are rewriting what karma means, not as punishment, but as transformation, not as history, but as possibility, not as something to fear, but as a reminder that you always have the power to begin again. You've just taken a journey through the heart of the Dharma own breath, one truth, one act of self-love at a time. From understanding your mind's habits to forgiving your past, from sitting in noble silence to embracing your changing body, you've seen that self-love in Buddhism isn't about pampering or praise. It's about presence. It's about choosing compassion when it's hardest. It's about realizing you're not broken, you're becoming. You've learned that real love begins when you stop running from yourself, when you breathe into suffering instead of avoiding it, when you stop clinging to who you were and start honoring who you are. You've seen that your value isn't in perfection, but in your willingness to stay present even when it's uncomfortable. And through every lesson, whether it was emptiness, equanimity, karma, or interbeing, you've been reminded that you are not alone. You are part of something vast, wise, and deeply alive. So before you drift off into rest, leave a comment below. What truth touched you the most tonight? Was it something you already knew but forgot? Or something new that softened your heart? Write it down. Let others see your insight. Your words might be what someone else needs to heal. If this brought you peace, or even just one quiet moment of stillness, consider subscribing to the channel. There's more to explore, more to heal, and more space for you, just as you are. Until next time, breathe gently, rest fully, love deeply. You're already on the path.